Well, fuck. This is exactly my thing. Just a direct comparison.
You're going to have 9
Like this.
So,
Oh, like here? So go there. I get marked up for not being confident. I am confident. We do that.
you're not confident.
We're confident. That's why we got this. Like why we're sitting here. I should print this out.
Yeah, you would figure it.
Does anybody need exhibit 3 or 5? No.
This mic is on. So actually, you get this for lawyers. This is already on their mic. Oh, wait, no. Yes. So as we every time an attorney talks, we'll wear it. So this clips on your waist.
Oh.
Or your pocket, whatever. Some people say that's easy. And this clips onto, I would do the lapel. You don't want it on here, so it doesn't move around. Yes.
So it's best to keep it here?
Yes. And then as an attorney goes, you'll pass it to the next one. So once your turn's done, you'll pass it to the next one.
We'll get a few moments to like exchange.
Yes. That's not a problem. So just
Should we go ahead and work on the mics?
yeah.
You'll have it.
It has to be switched. And so keep an eye on each other, make sure that because otherwise she'll be questioning here we see. We've just got one, so we've got cameras.
For introductions, I'm going to take it and I'm going to hold it to you and you're going to say, and then I'm going to hold to Abby, she'll say, and I'll go back to all the witnesses.
Really? That's what you're here. Yeah. It's like you're seeing us freak out a little bit. Yeah, that sounds great. Okay, go for it. Honestly, it's not whatever y'all are comfortable with. We're ready to go.
On the bar. Have you gotten the exhibits?
Just pass it on.
Have you gotten every single one?
Yeah.
What about stickers? Where's my stickers?
When we're introducing, do you want us to pass it along and then? Okay. Hold it up. Okay. And then when we're questioning, switch it out and then. Okay, got it. That's perfect.
Miss Garcia. I was gonna do that. Yes. I got it. Stop.
Miss Garcia, for opening and closing statements, do you want whoever's doing them to put the mic on and do it?
Yeah, just wear it, actually wear it for the opening. That way you don't have to worry about your hands.
Okay, so
Where do I?
you're going first.
Is it like?
No. I'm doing pre-trial.
I would get rid of the lanyard.
Oh, we're not supposed to wear them?
You don't need them anymore.
You don't need the lanyard anymore. It's going to rattle against that.
Take off, everybody
Yeah,
take off.
sorry, you don't need the lanyard anymore.
Y'all can take
Oh.
off
Now
the,
lose it because it's going to hit your mic.
it is, take off, you can leave, take the tags off, you don't need them anymore.
You guys don't need your name tags anymore. Only you. Everybody else does.
You can lose the name tag.
Actually, wait. I want to keep the. I want to.
That's fine. You can keep it. Just get.
Just like.
It's the letter J.
Okay.
Doesn't matter for me.
Okay. Wait, So how do you clip it? Because is there or should I just see? Oh no. I was just like, I think I might as well hold it because then I can hand it to everyone for introduction. No, sure. Okay.
I think that's totally fine. To hold it for the pre-trial and then hand it to
So you're good, Maxine?
If they're doing that, it's fine.
I know that you're
They can use them. It's not a rule violation to use.
Oh, yeah, we've already said that to everyone.
Guys, just so you know, they have an easel with a magnetic board with 5 magnets on it. It's the same as a cork board. If you wish to display something during the closing argument, you may do so, and you can use their board. Just the same.
Thank you.
Just the same as theirs. And so, since you're plaintiff, if you want to grab it and bring it up here on closing and stick something on it, that's fine, so that they don't get to drag it up. Okay? If it's available to both, it's available to both. Okay?
Thank you. And is this attached correctly, or would you suggest wearing it?
Pocket that, do you have a functioning
Is it better to wear it
Yeah,
that way?
so here's what we want you to do.
It doesn't actually open, unfortunately.
Okay, it's got this dude out here. Do you have?
I have a collar. Does that work? But
Okay, so you're gonna want to clip this about this distance from your mouth when you're speaking. And you absolutely, that'll go on, that can go on your hip. You're wearing a dress. Then what you could do is, you could either hold it in your hand or, yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. Yeah. So,
And then clip it, I would clip it.
yeah.
And if you're okay with that, otherwise.
I can just hold it. I rather just hold it like this.
Okay, and if you've got to present some evidence, the other thing you can do is clip it right on that thing right up front.
Yeah.
It'd be a little awkward with this thing, but it's an option,
Yeah.
because you don't really have anywhere else. I don't know if it would go on the.
Yeah, I don't know where this. Okay. So all admissible without. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I'll figure it out. I'm probably just gonna hold it. Yeah.
did you do all your questions?
Yeah. I do put in evidence. I do put in evidence for closing. I usually do. I forgot to do it for last round.
You mean you show it?
Yeah, I show
Okay,
those.
so what we can do in that minute that you're getting ready, put that on, and you could put that on the back behind your neck. She can help you with it.
Yeah, I can
Fix it to the collar and put your hair over it. And that would help you. And then you just keep it on. And then until you, just make sure you don't touch it.
Got it.
Because it's going to pick up.
Yeah.
They may give the mute you, and they may mute you. Don't count it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just take one.
I just want to make sure. Oh, no worries.
So we good here?
Yeah, we're good here. Oh yeah, I'm putting it here. I have a pocket.
They stitched it.
I know, but not.
With a little tiny.
I know. I haven't yet though. I'm not gonna do it in the clothes.
Hey, Addie, would you clip this for me behind?
20 holes because that way.
Okay, thank you. Hold the mic. Oh, yeah, right. Take it off right now. Put it on right before.
That's theirs, right? Guys, best foot forward. We got this, okay? There's not that much space to move around, so be careful where you're going. Can I raise this up a little? I have it back down. I'll take care of that. Don't worry. Oh, I can do. I have the person copy. And then we don't need to do roster, so that's fine. I'm gonna do this off my phone. I'll keep track of that.
Like every single time they said it.
Let's be organized. Let's not make our table. Oh, really? Do you all think that's a witness? Oh, wow.
All right. The Civil District Court of Texoma, Landry County is now in session. The Honorable Lana Myers presiding.
Please be seated. Good afternoon. I'll call the case. This is our cause number 219584, Mozzie de Orso, plaintiff versus Seascape Property and Casualty Insurance Company. And if I could have counsel for the plaintiff, please stand and introduce yourselves.
Yes, Your Honor, thank you. Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Prisha Mehta. I will be delivering the opening statements for the plaintiff, directing Mr. Eli Foy, as well as crossing Ms. Renee Rousseau.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Addie Romberkosh. I'll be conducting the direct examination of Tracy Dockray, the cross-examination of Remington Stoll, as well as delivering today's closing argument for the plaintiff.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Diksha Krishna. I'll be conducting the direct examination of Rasson Crowe and the cross-examination of Mozzie.
And if I could have the witnesses for plaintiff also, please stand and introduce yourselves.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Jackson Price, and I am Eli Foy.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Keishan Sargur, and I am Rasson Crowe.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Kate Gable, and I am Detective Tracy Dockray.
Thank you. If I could now have the attorneys for the defendant, please introduce yourselves.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Zoe Gameros. I will be directing Remington Stoll, crossing Detective Dockray, as well as delivering today's closing argument.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Maxine Lauthan, and I will be directing Mozzie, crossing Rasson Crowe, and delivering today's opening statement.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Abby Chapman. I'll be directing Renee Rousseau and crossing Eli Foy. May our witnesses introduce themselves?
Yes, please.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Connor Ortiz, and I am Mozzie.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Claire Taylor, and I am Remington Stoll.
Good evening, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Isabel Gameros, and I am Renee Rousseau.
All right. If you all please remain standing, and if you all, the witnesses, please stand and each raise your right hand. Do you promise that the testimony you're about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. You may be seated. Are there any matters that we need to take up before we begin the trial?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff has some brief pretrial matters to attend to. First, Your Honor, would you like a courtesy copy of the rules and exhibits?
Yes, please. Thank you.
Now, Your Honor, regarding movement about the well, is it okay for us to move about the well during openings and closings as well as questioning?
You may.
And Your Honor, we'd also like to pre-admit some exhibits pursuant to stipulations 1 and 17. Exhibits 2 and 10 have been deemed pre-admissible. We would like to pre-admit those two exhibits at this time, Your Honor.
All right, any objection to exhibits 2 and 10?
No objections, Your Honor. We would ask that exhibits 4 and 9 are also admitted in accordance with stipulations 17 and 21 at the same time.
All right, and any objection to 4 and 9?
Yes, Your Honor.
Seeing as those are also stipulated, no objection, Your Honor.
All right, and then the other exhibits that you mentioned are 17?
I mentioned only 2 and 10. This 17 is referring to the stipulation.
Okay, all right. So 2 and 10 and 4 and 9 are admitted.
And with that, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Okay, anything further?
For impeachment purposes, Your Honor, may we offer the witness a copy of their fact statement and hold a separate copy so that we can maintain social distancing?
Yes, you may.
Nothing further from the defense, Your Honor.
All right, plaintiff, call your first witness. Or, I'm sorry, you ready to begin your opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor, we are. May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
May it please the court, opposing counsel, members of the jury. My name is Prisha Mehta, and along with my co-counsel Adi Ramprakash and Diksha Krishna, I represent the plaintiff in this case, the Musée de Orso. Keeping your word is important. It's important for people. It's important for businesses. This case is about an insurance company that refuses to honor its commitments. Today you'll learn that my client, the Musée de Orso, purchased an insurance policy from the defendant, Seascape Property and Casualty Insurance Company. In May of 2021, the Musée de Orso was robbed. Over $100 million worth of paintings were lost. But members of the jury, when the museum filed a claim on this policy, Seascape refused coverage. Now, because Seascape failed to keep their word, we're suing the defendant for breach of contract. Now, as the plaintiff, we have the burden of proof in this case. We must prove first that the policy is a valid contract. Second, that Seascape refused to pay under the policy. And lastly, that the Musée de Orso suffered losses as a result. Members of the jury, today you'll see that every point we have the burden to prove is not disputed. Both parties agree that the policy is a valid contract. Both parties agree that Seascape refused to pay under the policy. And both parties agree that the Musée de Orso suffered losses as a result. So why are we here? We're here because the defendant alleges that the claim falls under an exception to the policy. Members of the jury, they claim that an employee of the Musée de Orso was involved in the robbery. But in order to prove that to you, members of the jury, they have to meet their legal burden. They must prove by a preponderance of the evidence that an employee was knowingly involved in this robbery. And they simply won't be able to do that to you today, members of the jury, because you'll hear from 3 witnesses. You'll hear first from Mr. Eli Foy, former chief of security at the Musée de Orso, who was on duty at the museum the night of the robbery. Now, you'll learn that when 2 men disguised as police officers showed up at the museum's rear exterior doors requesting assistance to catch a violent suspect, Mr. Foy, he followed his instincts, and he let them in. But you'll see that Mr. Foy had no idea who he was really letting in that night. Moments after Mr. Foy let in those supposed cops, they drew guns. They zip-tied Mr. Foy, and they threw him in an office where he remained for the rest of the night. You'll also hear from Mr. Crowe, the museum director at the Musée d'Orsay. Now, you'll learn that the robbery was devastating for the museum. 5 of its most valuable pieces of artwork were stolen. And members of the jury, lastly, you'll hear from Detective Tracy Dockray, the lead investigator at the Russellville Police Department. She'll walk you through her meticulous 10-day investigation into this robbery. You'll learn that she investigated Mr. Foy thoroughly, interviewed him twice, conducted multiple unannounced searches of Mr. Foy's possessions and property, and found no evidence incriminating him. Now, the defendant will also call their own witnesses to the stand. They'll call Miss Mozzie to the stand, an employee who was on duty with Mr. Foy the night of the robbery. Members of the jury, you'll learn that Miss Mozzie can hardly even remember what happened that night. And you'll see that Seascape is paying her a significant amount to testify today. You'll also hear from Miss Remington Stoll, an expert security consultant at Seascape. My co-counsel will demonstrate significant flaws in her analysis. And you'll learn that Seascape is also paying her a hefty sum to testify today. And lastly, members of the jury, you'll hear from Miss Renee Rousseau, Seascape's lead investigator. You'll learn that she had her mind made up before she even started this investigation, members of the jury. And she, too, is being paid a significant amount to deny this claim. Members of the jury, when businesses like the Musée d'Orsay suffer losses, they depend on insurance companies to be faithful. When insurance companies breach their contract, when they fail to keep their word, businesses like the Musée d'Orsay suffer irreversible consequences. By the end of this trial, Seascape's failure will be clear. You'll have no other choice but to find Seascape liable for breach of contract. Thank you.
Opening, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
May it please the court, Your Honor, members of the jury. Time. Time can be a friend or a foe. You can have too much time or too little, or maybe you were there at just the right time. On May 1st, 2021, Musée d'Orsay was running out of time. The museum was in financial straits and had chronically low attendance. Museum director Rasson Crowe needed something big. And now what could be bigger than a very high-profile art heist? Your Honor, members of the jury, my name is Maxine Lauthan, and along with my law partners, Zoe Gameros and Abigail Chapman, we are representing the defendant in this case, Seascape Property and Casualty Insurance Company. Seascape is an insurance company, and kind of like lawyers, everyone hates insurance companies until you need one, right? And you especially hate your insurance company if they deny your claim. But an insurance company is entitled to deny your claim if an exclusion applies. And that's the situation here. In this case, plaintiff claims that Seascape breached its insurance contract. Plaintiff bears the burden of proving all its elements. As a defense, Seascape may show it is not liable if it validly denied the claim because a then employee of the museum knowingly participated in the heist, which is an exclusion. We will meet our burden. The evidence will show that museum director Rasson Crowe notified Seascape of the theft on the day of the robbery. Now, at the time of the heist, Crowe just happened to be on a plane. Nevertheless, Crowe will tell you we expect that the initial demand made towards Seascape was for a loss of greater than $10 million. Crowe made this claim before allegedly knowing what 5 art pieces had been stolen. In response to the theft, Seascape sent out its investigator, Miss Renee Rousseau. Miss Rousseau will tell you today that prior to any investigation, she starts by speaking with defense's outside expert on art theft. Miss Remington Stoll. Miss Stoll was familiar with the museum's security system, which was limited to exterior-only protection. It may be hard to crack, but nothing could stop a theft once robbers were allowed inside. Because of this, Miss Stoll immediately suggested that an inside accomplice would be needed to execute this heist. Miss Rousseau began her investigation by 1. Determining how the museum was robbed. 2. Who were the possible suspect or suspects. And 3. She tried to get a lead on the stolen art. Upon investigating, Miss Rousseau learned that the museum's CCTV system had been wiped. A hard drive that contained original video files had been destroyed. And now, who was the only ordinary person with access to this hard drive and cloud server? Museum Director Rasson Crowe. Eli Foy, a museum employee, was present when this password was last changed to the cloud server. Eli Foy violated strict security protocol by letting robbers through both the exterior and interior security door. Eli Foy was alone with the robbers for 3 minutes, time where Eli Foy did not call the police or Museum Director Rasson Crowe. Well, after the robbers were allowed inside, Eli Foy then gave them the guards' badges and cell phones, which assisted them in leaving the building. Mozzie, the other guard working at that time, was tied up in Eli Foy's presence, but no one ever saw Eli Foy getting tied up. Additionally, door logs will be provided that show inconsistencies with Foy's story. The timing just does not match up. We expect you will hear today from plaintiff's witness, Detective Tracy Dockray, that 75 art screws were recovered from the scene. Defense expert Stoll will tell you the importance of this goes back to timing. Art screws must be removed with slow precision and accuracy, approximately 1 minute a screw, and that's for the best art thief in the world. That's much more for the average. This had to have been a 3-person job. That makes Eli Foy the 3rd person. And what about that 3rd person? It's all in the timing. Just 2 days after the robbery, over $1 million was deposited into Eli Foy's bank account. We expect there will be no evidence presented in court today to show where that money came from. My grandma was fond of saying, time will tell, and in this case, members of the jury, time really does tell. When looking at the evidence today, we advise you to look towards the timing. When you do, the only answer to the question of if a then employee of the museum knowingly participated in the heist will be a yes. Thank you.
Plaintiff, call your first witness.
Yes, Your Honor. At this time, plaintiff calls Mr. Eli Foy to the stand.
Mr. Foy.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Foy. Please introduce yourself to the court.
My name is Eli Foy, and I'm 57 years old.
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, originally, I'm from New York, where I was a member of the NYPD for almost 18 years.
Where do you currently live?
Right now, I live in Russellville, Texoma, with my lovely wife, Sydney.
Mr. Foy, where did you most recently work?
Well, I was actually a security guard for the Musée d'Orsay. I was the deputy security chief for about 5 years before being promoted to the chief of security for almost 11 years. And I also started to dabble in crypto around that time as well.
Mr. Foy, could you tell us a little bit more about your cryptocurrency investments?
Well, about 5 years ago, before my son passed away, he recommended that I get invested into cryptocurrency. And so it was around that time that I bought my first 200 Faith coins through Coin Platform. And I was invested.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. This witness is referring to records that will not be admitted today, and this is an out-of-court statement being used for the truth.
Response.
Your Honor, Mr. Foy hasn't testified to any out-of-court statements. He's simply saying that he has been investing in cryptocurrency, and he's not referring to any specific out-of-court record, Your Honor.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
The witness is specifically referring to records that he claims were destroyed, and because opposing counsel will not bring forth these records today as they do not exist, it is an out-of-court statement being used for the truth because they were trying to prove that this is where that money came from.
Response.
Your Honor, Mr. Foy hasn't gone into any records. He's simply explaining how he got into cryptocurrency, Your Honor.
Overrule.
So again, Mr. Foy, tell us a little bit more about your cryptocurrency.
Well, like I said, after he recommended that I get into cryptocurrency and I bought my first 200 faith coins, after the museum I was working at was robbed, and I decided it was time for me and my wife to settle down and retire. So we sold our cryptocurrency and we made just enough.
So why did you decide to sell your crypto and currency or investments?
Well, that month, May of last year, was really difficult for both my wife and I. And so after the museum I was working at was robbed is when we decided that it was time for us to retire.
Now, Mr. Foy, I want to talk to you a little bit more in detail about the night of the robbery. Where were you that night?
Well, that night I had been scheduled by the museum director to work the night shift. I was working with one of our newer guards, Mozzie, and it ran from about midnight to 8 a.m. the next morning.
How did the night start?
Well, at the museum, we guards do rounds of the museum just to check up on everything and make sure that everything is in the right place. And so when I got to the museum at about 11:30, Mozzie got there about 5 minutes after I did, and then we both proceeded in through the exterior door to determine who would have the first round for the night.
In these rounds, Mr. Foy, how long did they last until that night?
They were about an hour apart, and they lasted up until about 3:30 a.m.
So at 3:30, once those rounds were over, what happened?
Well, I finished that third round for the night, and I got back to the security room where we heard a buzz from the rear exterior door.
Your Honor, permission to approach the witness with what has been marked as Exhibit 1.
You may.
Tendering to opposing counsel for identification purposes. Mr. Foy, do you recognize this exhibit?
Yes, ma'am. This is a map of the museum.
Is it a fair and accurate copy of that map to your knowledge?
As far as I can tell, yes, it is.
Your Honor, at this time, we move to offer Exhibit 1 into evidence pursuant to Stipulation 17. It's been deemed admissible once identified.
Any objection?
Your Honor, pursuant to Stipulation 19, it is admissible once identified, so no objections.
All right, Exhibit 1 is admitted.
Your Honor, may the witness step down for demonstrative purposes at this time?
Yes, you may.
If you could hold that up for the jury, Mr. Foy. So you said you heard a buzz at the exterior security door when you got back from your round. Could you show us where you heard that buzz?
Yes.
Your Honor, I apologize. May I reposition myself so I can see what the witness is
Yes, you may.
referring to? Thank you.
So what did you do, or what did you do when you heard that buzz?
So I was here in the security room, and the buzz came from here at the exterior security door. So once we heard the buzz, we followed protocol, which is to get on the security terminal and check the cameras to see who's out there.
And once you checked those cameras, what did you see?
We saw 2 Russellville police officers dressed in full uniform standing at the door.
Thank you, Mr. Foy. You may be seated. When you saw those 2 police officers, Mr. Foy, what did you decide to do?
Well, I wanted to see if there was anything that I could help them with, so I got on the intercom and I asked them if they needed any assistance.
What happened then?
Well, they actually told me that a fellow cop had been shot in the area and that they needed to see our exterior security camera footage immediately in order to help catch the suspect.
Mr. Foy, how did you react to this?
Well, as a former police officer, it really hit me hard to hear that another cop had been shot. Additionally, I know that the longer you wait on a suspect like this in order to apprehend them, the more likely it is that they'll get away. And so we had to act quickly in this situation. So I told Mozzie to open the exterior door so that I could get a little bit more information.
So you told Mozzie. How did Mozzie react?
Well, Mozzie actually refused to open the exterior door at the time. He said that it was against protocol to do so. But I believe he was wrong about that in that situation.
Why was Mozzie wrong about that?
Well, it's actually pretty standard procedure to open the exterior door for anyone that we believe might have a reason to be in the museum.
So what did you decide to do ultimately?
Well, I do regret how harsh I was toward Mozzie at the time. I didn't have time to explain the protocol to him, and so after he refused a second time, I just headed out to the exterior door and I opened it up myself to meet these cops in the interior hallway.
So you met them in the interior hallway, Mr. Foy. What happened there?
Well, I explained to them that I would have to call the museum director, Rasson, Crowe, before actually letting them into the museum, as was protocol. But right as I started to do that, things really started to escalate.
What do you mean things started to escalate?
Well, one of the cops pulled his radio out, and there was a burst of static. I couldn't really hear what was said. But he turned to his partner, and he said that the suspect had been spotted around the museum, and then he turned to me and demanded to be let in the door immediately.
Mr. Foy, how did you react to that?
Well, in this moment, my police instincts really just kicked in. I knew that I was going to help these men in any capacity that they needed, and so when he asked me to open the door for him, I did.
And what happened after you opened the door for them?
Well, they raced past me into the security room, and by the time I could catch up to them, they were already there with Mozzie, and when I got next to them, they pulled guns on us and said that they were robbing the museum.
Mr. Foy, when you let those men in, did you know they were going to pull guns on you?
No, I was completely shocked. I thought that I was going to help police officers catch a suspect in a violent situation.
Did you know that those supposed cops were robbers?
No, I had no idea.
So what happened after they got to the security room?
Well, like I said, after they pulled guns on us, I was completely shocked. There really wasn't anything that we could do at the time. Neither guard was armed at the time, and guards were not armed at the museum. And so I really didn't want to do anything that might put Mozzie's life or my own in danger at that time, because these robbers seemed like they were real professionals.
You said they seemed like they were real professionals. What made you think that?
Well, the first thing they did after pulling guns on us was to pull out gloves and put those on, and then they collected both our cell phones and our security badges. They kept our security badges and they crushed our cell phones.
Did they do anything else?
Well, while one of them held us at gunpoint, the other one basically ravaged the entire security room. He looked around for just a second before finding the external hard drive that we store our security camera footage on, and he crushed that to pieces before getting over on the security terminal.
So they got onto the security terminal. Did anything happen as they did that?
One of them said the cloud had been deleted.
This cloud that they referred to, Mr. Foy, do you know anything about it?
I know that it's where we store our security camera footage online, but I don't know how to get into it. That's something that only Rasson and Crowe would know.
So, Mr. Foy, as all of this was happening in the security room, where were you and Mozzie?
Me and Mozzie were over up against a wall with a gun pointed to both of our heads the entire time that this was happening.
And did the robbers do anything else with you both that night?
Well, after they finished on the security terminal, he pulled out zip ties. He came over to both me and Mozzie, and they split us up in separate offices and tied our hands and feet together.
So, after those robbers zip-tied you and put you in an office, did you ever interact with them later that night?
I never interacted with them again. One of them did open the door to the office that I was in, but I didn't speak to him. I remained zip-tied the entire time that this was happening, and I did not leave the office.
So, to be clear, Mr. Foy, were you ever let out of those zip ties that night?
No, I stayed in those zip ties until about 7:30 the next morning.
So, let's talk about what happened the next morning at around 7:30. What's the first thing that you remember happening?
The first thing that I can remember is that when they finally let me out of that dark room, I was glad to see that Mozzie was okay. He didn't seem too physically hurt. I also remember that just a few minutes after that, someone called the actual police, and Detective Dockray showed up to interview both me and Mozzie.
And how did that interview with Detective Dockray go?
I would say that it went quite well. I made sure to recount almost everything that I could remember from the night before. I was slightly rattled, but I think that I did a good job conveying most things. Then when she heard that we'd been damaged from the zip ties, we had some red marks, she had us checked out by some EMTs before sending us home.
So, Mr. Foy, if you can remember, during that interview with Detective Dockray, did you forget to tell her anything?
Yes, like I said, I was slightly rattled, and so I did forget to mention the fact that the robbers did check on me before they left.
Did you later bring that up?
I did, yes.
Okay, so, after this initial interview with Detective Dockray, were you ever contacted by the police again?
I was. About 3:15 that same day, Detective Dockray and a bunch of other police officers showed up unannounced to my home. They did a very thorough search. They checked my house, my car, and I even let them have my laptop for analysis.
And to your knowledge, Mr. Foy, did they find anything?
Not to my knowledge, no. They searched my house 2 more times the following week, and to my knowledge, no. I have not been contacted since.
Your Honor, at this time, I pass the witness and like to publish Exhibit 1 to the jury.
You may publish Exhibit 1 to the jury.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
Yes,
May I proceed?
you may.
Good afternoon, Mr. Foy. My name is Abby Chapman, and I'm going to be asking you some questions today. You testified on your direct examination that you later brought up the fact that you remembered that your door opened while you were supposedly tied up, correct?
Yes, I did mention it in my statement this morning before court.
Right. The first time you ever brought this up was today in your addendum, true?
That is correct, because it was the first time that I remembered it, yes.
Today in your addendum, after reading that door log that we mentioned, correct? That stated that your door was opened when you were supposedly tied up, right?
It was prior going through the case, or post going through the case, yes.
Right. You worked with NYPD for 18 years, true?
I was a police officer for 18 years, yes.
In that time, you were even able to solve some art theft cases, right?
I investigated and solved a few art theft cases, yes.
You were familiar with art theft before becoming an employee of Musée d'Orsay.
I investigated a few cases, not many in my long career.
Sir, you were familiar with art theft, correct?
I went through a few cases.
Is that a yes to my question?
Yes,
At the museum, your position was chief of security, true?
it was, yes.
It was actually your urging that installed the most recent security system at the museum?
It was by my recommendation, that's correct.
This system only included measures that kept people from getting into the museum, right?
That was the security system.
Once inside, there were no measures such as alarm systems that would sound by motion.
We
Correct.
do have a variety of locked doors.
Sir, my question was once inside the museum, there are no alarms that would be sounded if art were to be removed, right?
I'm not aware of an alarm, no.
And as you said, guards don't carry any weapons, correct?
We don't carry weapons at the museum, that's correct.
As the recommender of this system, you're aware that once inside the museum, nothing actually kept a robber from stealing art, right?
Well, we did not expect that the robbers would be armed.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
Sustain.
As the recommender of this system, once inside the museum, you're aware that nothing actually kept robbers from stealing art, right?
That is correct.
You even recommended against increased police patrol 2 days prior to the robbery, right?
After going over that, yes, we did, only because we believed that our system was state-of-the-art and because we'd received a variety of these recommendations in the past that had not meant anything.
That's yes to my question, that you recommended against increased police patrol 2 days prior to the robbery?
Yes, because we'd received a variety of those reports.
As the chief of security, to be fair, you knew the ins and outs of the system, right?
I knew the system, yes.
You knew where the cameras were located?
I would say so, yes.
You knew where the hard drive was stored in that cabinet?
I know the system, yes.
You knew that that footage was stored on the hard drive?
Yes.
You knew about the most recent password change, correct?
I knew that the password was changed, yes.
Right. You were in the room when it was changed, actually.
I was actually in the room, but I could not see the computer.
Okay. You have no idea how the robbers immediately knew where that hard drive was, right?
They didn't immediately know. They did look around for just a second.
Sir, is it your testimony that the robbers did not go to that cabinet, that unmarked cabinet, as soon as they got in there?
It is my testimony that it took them a few seconds, yes.
You've no idea how the robbers were able to access a password-protected computer, true?
I don't have any idea how they either learned the password or hacked the computer, no.
You claim that you were tied up after Merritt Mozzie, right?
I was tied up after Merritt Mozzie, yes.
This means that no one was able to see you tied up until the following morning, correct?
That's correct, because there were only 4 of us in the museum at the time, and the one that was on my side was just locked in an office.
Right, sir, but no one will be able to testify that they ever saw you tied up until 7 a.m. the next morning, correct?
7:30, unfortunately not.
You even gave the robbers both ID badges, true?
They collected our ID badges and our cell phones at gunpoint.
Is that a yes to my question?
That is a yes.
This ended up aiding the robbers' easy escape on the way out of the museum, right?
They did use our security badges to leave, yes.
As part of the system that you recommended, correct?
Yes.
You were the only reason that these robbers were able to enter the museum, true?
I wouldn't say that I was the only reason. I was the one that let them in.
Right, sir. You opened the exterior door for them, true?
I opened the door so that I could get more information about what I thought at the time to be a time-sensitive situation, yes.
You opened the interior door for them, correct?
After they demanded to be let in, yes.
Right. So no one else did those things, true?
That was me attempting to aid 2 fellow police officers catch a very violent suspect on the loose.
And this was a breach of protocol, correct?
This was a breach of protocol.
Yet you were never reprimanded by Rasson Crowe in any way, correct?
No, because Rasson Crowe agrees with me that I handled
Objection, Your Honor. The witness has begun to speculate.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Response.
Your Honor, I don't even believe Mr. Foy finished his answer to opposing counsel's question.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
The witness's portion of testimony was speculative. As he said, I believe that Rasson Crowe agrees with me, and that is speculation, as his witness cannot testify to the knowledge of another person.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
Mr. Foy wasn't allowed to finish his answer.
I'll sustain the objection.
Your Honor, may I ask that the jury disregard that statement?
Members of the jury are instructed to disregard the last answer by the witness.
You were never reprimanded by Rasson Crowe in any way following your breach of protocol?
No, because he agrees with me.
And Rasson Crowe was the one... Sorry, Your Honor, I'd like to re-raise my objection.
You may.
Speculation.
Response.
Your Honor, Mr. Foy is testifying to the knowledge of Mr. Foy, who he was, Mr. Crowe, who he was an employee with. So, Your Honor, he's testifying to his rationally based perception, being an employee with Mr. Crowe.
Your Honor, the witness cannot testify to their rationally based perception on the knowledge of another human, which is what opposing counsel just stated, that he's testifying to knowledge.
Sustain.
Rasson Crowe never reprimanded you in any way following your breach of protocol, correct?
No, he did not.
And this is the same Rasson Crowe that knew the security password, right?
Rasson Crowe did know the password, yes.
Your Honor, I may approach the witness with what has already been admitted as Exhibit 4.
You may.
I want to talk a bit about the timing of your story. At 3:32, you opened the exterior door for the robbers, correct?
Yes, I did.
The interior door didn't open until 3:35, right?
That is correct.
In those 3 minutes, you made no attempts to call Rasson Crowe to follow protocol, true?
No, in those 3 minutes, we were discussing the situation before they received an update on the situation, and then they demanded to be let in.
Sir, my question was, in those 3 minutes, you made no attempts to call Rasson Crowe and follow protocol, true?
Calling Rasson Crowe was going to be my next step.
My question was, you made no attempts to call Rasson Crowe in those 3 minutes, correct?
I did not get that far, no.
You made no attempts to call police to verify that these were real police officers, did you?
I did not, no.
If you really believed this was an emergency, all you ever had to do was use your fingerprint to open that door, right?
Yes.
Though you had the ability all along, you were waiting for Mozzie to open this interior door, true?
It is protocol for one of the guards to open the door and the other one to go to the interior hallway.
Sir, my question was, though you had this ability, you did not do it for 3 minutes, true?
That's correct.
And, okay, sir. Well, you after 3 minutes, you did open the door, right?
Because they demanded to be let in, yes.
Right. I want to continue to talk about the timing of your story. At 3:46, Mayor Mozzie was placed in Office 2, true?
Yes, he was.
You then claimed that you were put into Office 1.
I was put into Office 1 after this, yes.
The door to Office 1 didn't open until 3:54, true?
They did tie me up before placing me in there, yes.
I'm going to refer to Exhibit 1. So that means it took you 8 minutes to walk from Office 2 to Office 1,
It
right?
took them 8 minutes to walk from Office 2 to Office 1 and tie me up, yes.
Right, and in that time you were alone with the two robbers, correct?
Yes.
As we stated, you also happened to forget that your door opened while you were supposedly tied up at 4:52 a.m.?
Yes, but like I said, I did mention it this morning when I was given the chance.
Right, the first time you ever mentioned that was this morning.
Yes.
And 4:52 a.m., when that door opened again, was right before the robbers left the museum, right?
It was just a few minutes before they left, yes.
And back to that interior door opening, though you had the ability, you waited for Mayor Mozzie to do this?
I waited to get more information about the situation before opening the interior.
You did this because you were waiting. You didn't want to implicate yourself in a crime more than you already had, right?
Absolutely not. I was waiting to get more information about the situation, like I said.
Okay. And the second door opening wasn't your only new memory. You also happened to forget that you ever handled Mayor Mozzie's ID badge, true?
That wasn't something that I thought that I needed to mention at the time.
That's a yes to my question.
That is a yes.
The first time you ever mentioned this was today in your addendum, right?
That's correct.
After reading the DNA analysis that stated that your fingerprints were found on the ID badge, right?
It was after reading the trial today, yes.
The same ID badge that aided the robbers' escape on the way out.
They also could have used Merritt Mozzie's badge, but
Objection,
yes.
Your Honor. Non-responsive.
Sustain.
This was the same ID badge that aided the robbers' escape on the way out?
Yes, it was.
2 days after the robbery, you received $1,089,000 in your bank account, correct?
I did, yes.
There's absolutely no record of where this money came from.
There's
True.
no.
Part of the reason you decided to retire and withdraw this money was because you were angry with Seascape for accusing you of aiding in the robbery, right?
I was, yes.
You were made aware that you were being accused of aiding in the robbery a week after the robbery, am I correct?
That is correct.
By that point, you had made that withdrawal 5 days prior, correct?
I had cashed out, yes.
So Seascape's accusation could not have possibly motivated you to withdraw this mysterious $1,089,000 because you were not even aware that you were being accused yet. True.
I did talk to Rasson Crowe before, and he did mention that the insurance investigator did seem to think that I had something to do with it.
Sir, is it your testimony that you were aware that you were being accused of aiding in the robbery prior to that time that you were made aware, a week after?
Yes, because after speaking to the insurance investigator, I had a feeling from her investigation that she somehow thought that I had something to do with it.
Right, sir, you had a feeling, but you were not made aware until a week after the robbery, correct?
I was not told directly. That's correct.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Brief redirect, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Mr. Foy, when Mr. Mozzie refused to open the door, did you ultimately go and open it yourself?
Yes, I did.
And Mr. Foy, regarding those badges that opposing counsel brought up, did you ever touch Miss Mozzie's badge, Mr. Mozzie's badge that night?
I briefly did when she handed it to me to hand to the robbers.
So why did you take Mr. Mozzie's badge?
Simply because I was closer to the robbers than he was, and so it was better for me to just give it to them.
So did those robbers demand that you hand over the badges?
They demanded cell phones and security badges at gunpoint, yes, ma'am.
Okay. I pass the witness, Your Honor.
No recross, Your Honor. I just asked that we publish Exhibit 4 to the jury.
All right, you may publish Exhibit 4. You may step down.
Your Honor, the plaintiff calls Rasson Crowe to the stand.
All right, Mr. Crowe.
Good evening, Mr. Crowe. Please introduce yourself to the court.
Bonsoir, my name is Rasson Crowe, and I'm 31 years old.
Now, just going over your background, what do you do for a living?
Well, I am currently the museum director at Musée d'Orsay.
And how long have you had this position?
Well, I have been director for 4 years now, but I have been a curator at this museum for 5 years previously.
And what does this position actually entail?
Well, simply put, the overall well-being of the museum is all my responsibility.
Now, I want to talk specifically about the day of the robbery. Where were you that day?
I was flying back from Europe to New York.
And what did you do after landing in New York?
Well, I checked my phone, and that is when I found that that 5 precious paintings from my museum had been stolen.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has been marked as Exhibit 3?
You may.
Tendering to opposing counsel for identification purposes only. Now, Mr. Crowe, what are these documents?
These are images, copies of the stolen paintings.
And to your knowledge, is this an accurate depiction of these stolen paintings?
Oui, they are. I actually made these copies for this trial.
Your Honor, I move to admit Exhibit 3 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 3 is admitted.
And Your Honor, may the witness step down for demonstrative purposes?
He may.
Your Honor, may I move myself to...
Yes, you may.
Now, Mr. Crowe, can you tell me about this first painting?
This is Le Petit or Le Petit Crowe.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance?
Response, Your Honor?
You may.
Your Honor, these were the exact paintings that were stolen from the museum at the night of the robbery and therefore extremely relevant to today's case.
Overrule.
Now, Mr. Crowe, tell me a little bit about the first painting.
This is Le Pigeon or Le Petit Crowe by Pablo Picasso. That is Pigeon with Peace by Pablo Picasso in English. And it is a combination of his style of cubism with West African tribal culture.
And tell me a little bit about the picture of the scenery.
This is La Pastorale by André Matisse. In English, La Pastorale by André Matisse. It is one of the first Impressionist paintings and inspired many of that time period.
And tell me a little bit about the painting of the lady.
This is La Femme à l'Avancée by an Italian painter who was in his final years when he made this. But the power of art allowed him to live on, to share his masterpiece with us before he passed.
Thank you, Mr. Crowe. You may sit back down.
Merci, madame.
Now, Mr. Crowe, were you able to come back to Texoma that day?
Oui, I was. I got back to the museum at 9:15 in the night.
And did you meet with Detective Dockray?
I did, in the security room, where I saw for myself the damages done to our hard drive and cloud server containing security footage.
What were these damages?
Well, the hard drive was shattered, and the cloud server was wiped and stopped from saving any new files.
And Mr. Crowe, to your personal knowledge, who knew about the password to the cloud server?
Well, I created a 25-character long password to the server, and I never shared it with anybody. Our security company, Rexford Solutions, also had a password, but I do not know who they could have shared it with.
And now, Mr. Crowe, do you have an insurance contract with Seascape Insurance?
Oui, we do.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has been pre-admitted as Exhibit 2?
You may.
Now, Mr. Crowe, what is this document?
This is a copy of our contract with Seascape.
And when was it made?
It was made on September 1st of 2017.
And when was it renewed?
Well, it was most recently renewed on January 1st, 2021.
Now, Mr. Crowe, what are some of the covered risks under the contract?
Well, the covered risks were theft or robbery, and the amount covered was from $10 to $100 million of stolen goods.
And what are some of the notices?
The notices were any claim had to be filed within 24 hours of whatever incident happened.
And what was the exclusion from the contract?
The exclusions were theft or robbery, in which a current employee of the museum knowingly participated in.
Thank you, Mr. Crowe. Now, Mr. Crowe, I want to talk about your time at the museum. Are you aware of its layout?
Oui, of course. As the director, I have extensive knowledge of the layout.
Your Honor, permission to retrieve Exhibit 1 from the jury?
You may.
And Your Honor, seeing as it's already been pre-admitted, may the witness step down for demonstrative purposes?
Yes, you may.
Your Honor, may I position myself?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Crowe, where were the paintings stolen from?
The paintings were stolen from the Still Life collection on the southwest end of the museum.
And what do the dotted lines across the map represent?
These all represent doors that require security authorization to open.
And what are the two doors here?
These are the interior and exterior security doors.
And was there a protocol in place to open these doors?
Oui, there was. Any guards for non-employees could open the exterior door in case of emergency or to gather information. But to open the interior door, they needed to contact me.
And Mr. Crowe, you may sit back down. Thank you.
Merci again, madam.
Now, Mr. Crowe, I want to address your Now, moving on, were you ever investigated by or interviewed by anyone during the investigation?
Oui, I was, by Detective Dockray from the Russellville Police Department and by Miss Rousseau, an agent of Seascape.
And when was the next time you were contacted by Seascape Property and Casualty Insurance Company?
Well, it was May 10th when Miss Rousseau contacted me and, just like my aunt, told me that Seascape was denying our claim. My aunt was a very strange and cross aunt indeed.
Now, why was this?
Well, Seascape had convinced themselves that Eli Foy, our chief of security, had knowingly aided the robbers in their robbery.
Now, Mr. Crowe, I want to talk about your experience in the museum. How long had you worked there?
Well, I have been working at the museum for a total of 9 years.
And during this period of time, did you have any issues with any of your employees?
Only one, Miss Melissa Roberts, who was unfortunately terminated. But other than her, none of my employees have had issues.
Thank you, Mr. Crowe. Your Honor, I would ask to publish Exhibits 1, 2, and 3 to the jury, and I pass the witness.
All right, you may publish those exhibits to the jury.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Crowe. My name is Maxine Lauthen, and I'm going to be asking you a few questions today.
Bonsoir.
Musée d'Orsay protocol requires a Musée d'Orsay security guard to get direct authorization from you, either in person or over the phone, before opening the interior security door, yes?
That is all true, oui.
You fired a past security guard for violating this exact protocol, right?
I did fire Melissa Roberts for violating that protocol in a very different situation.
Well, Eli Foy violated this exact same protocol, right?
Oui, in a different situation.
But that's a yes to my question?
That is, oui.
But to be clear, you did not fire Eli Foy, did you?
I did not, no.
Now let's discuss your job. You set the schedule for the guards, correct?
I do set the schedule, oui.
That means on April 30th to May 1st, you put Eli Foy and Mozzie together, yes?
I did. I thought that Mr. Mozzie needed some night shifts.
Because you set the schedule, you knew this was Mozzie's first time working the night shift at Musée d'Orsay, yes?
I did, and he needed to start somewhere.
So to make it clear, you scheduled the rookie at the time of the robbery?
I did. Mr. Mozzie was our newest guard at the time.
Now let's discuss the cloud server. Musée d'Orsay has a cloud server that backs up video footage, yes?
That is true. It did used to have one.
To access this cloud server, you need a special password, right?
That is how I access it, oui.
You are supposed to be the only one who knows this password, correct?
I am, oui.
But when this password was last changed, Eli Foy was in the room, yes?
Oui. Him and 2 Rexford Solutions employees.
You learned that during the robbery, the robbers wiped all video footage, yes?
Oui, somehow they did.
You personally reached out to Rexford Solutions about this access, correct?
I did, oui.
Rexford Solutions denied that the administrative password had been used, yes?
They did deny that, oui.
Rexford Solutions also denied that a hack had occurred based upon a thorough analysis, yes?
That was not Rexford Solutions, I believe, that denied that.
Haven't you previously testified before that Rexford Solutions did deny that a hack had occurred?
Excusez-moi?
Haven't you previously testified that Rexford Solutions did deny that a hack occurred?
They denied that their system had been hacked. They denied that their system had been hacked.
Sir, Rexford Solutions denied that a hack had occurred.
Rexford
Yes?
Solutions denied, oui.
Now let's discuss the insurance claim you sent. You sent notice of insurance claim while still in the airport, right?
Oui, I did.
You sent this notice within hours of finding out about the heist, correct?
That is true after I contacted the museum owner and our attorney.
It wasn't until you actually arrived at the museum you had learned what had been stolen, yes?
No, I had a call with Detective Dockray, where he informed me of the situation.
Have you previously testified before that you knew the 5 art pieces that were stolen when making the claim?
When making the claim, I did, oui.
You gave a fact statement in this case, correct?
Oui, I did.
You signed this under oath, true?
That is true, oui.
I am now showing you your fact statement. Is this a correct copy?
Oui, it is.
And this is your signature, true?
That is true, oui.
Read silently as I read aloud. On page 3, lines 28 to 30. I had several hours until that flight took off, so I called the museum owner and then consulted with our attorney, who put together a letter for us to send to our insurance company, Seascape, to officially file an insurance claim. Did I read that correctly?
Oui.
So nowhere in your statement you testified before that you knew the 5 pieces when you made the claim, correct?
I did testify that I made a call with Detective Dockray, and he informed me of the situation, and he was investigating.
Okay, sir, now let's discuss the museum. In the years leading up to the heist, Musée d'Orsay was in a bit of financial trouble, right?
Just a bit, oui.
There was chronically low attendance, true?
Oui, there was.
Seascape would give the museum up to $100 million if a theft occurred, right?
Oui, they would, if, of course, the value was that much.
You certainly cannot deny that $100 million would go a long way to make your little museum a whole lot nicer.
If we had received it just by itself, oui, but unfortunately, we are receiving this to fix the losses.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
Overrule.
Would you like to continue with your answer?
We are receiving this to fix the losses, and so it does not help us grow, but it could alleviate some damage that we are entitled to.
After the robbery, Musée d'Orsay experienced an unexpected positive impact, right?
We did have moderate increase in attendance and a few more donors.
No publicity is bad publicity, right, sir?
That is true, but unfortunately, this publicity came at a large cost.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Brief redirect, Your Honor. So, Mr. Crowe, why did you fire Melissa Roberts and not Mr. Foy?
I fired Melissa Roberts because our situation had no reason to break protocol the way she did. Mr. Foy's situation needed his judgments quickly, and I can understand that.
Now, moving on to the password. To your knowledge, who knew about the password to the cloud server?
Only I did, and again, our security company also had a password.
And how long was this password?
My password was 25 characters long.
And finally, Mr. Crowe, how much money will you be? How much is Seascape covering in terms of insurance?
Seascape would cover $100 million of stolen goods.
So are you gaining all the money back that you're losing from the paintings?
No, unfortunately, the value of the paintings was in money $110 million, and in my heart a lot more.
And is the museum facing any type of bankruptcy?
No, not at all.
Thank you, Your Honor. I pass the witness.
Recross.
No recross, Your Honor.
All right, thank you. Now step down. Call your next witness.
The plaintiff calls Detective Tracy Dockray to the stand, Your Honor. And before I begin, Your Honor, I'd like to ask how much time I have for direct examination.
6 minutes and 22 seconds.
May I proceed?
You may.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Please introduce yourself for the court.
Hello, my name is Tracy Dockray, and I am a lead investigator for the Russellville PD.
So tell us a little bit about your educational background.
So, I have a degree in criminal justice, and I also graduated from the Farmville Police Academy with top marks. There I spent 1,431 hours taking courses in security awareness training, investigative techniques, and professional policing.
And after you graduated from Police Academy, what were your next actions?
Well, I began my first job at the Farmville Police Department, and there I gained most of my experience in procedures and protocol over about 10 years of work.
And you introduced yourself as a lead investigator for the Russellville PD. What are some of your responsibilities as a lead investigator?
I regularly handle arrests, warrants, witness interviews, and investigating felonies such as theft and robbery.
And what expertise do you have in your field?
I am an expert in criminal investigations.
Now, moving on to your involvement in this case, how are you connected to the robbery at the Musée d'Orsay?
Well, I actually led the investigation into the robbery of the museum.
And prior to the robbery, were you familiar with the museum?
Yes, I'm actually a frequent visitor of the museum, so I am familiar with the layout and the artwork.
Did you work with anyone during your investigation?
I did. I worked alongside Renee Rousseau from Seascape Insurance, and I also called in the FBI to assist on forensic testing for us.
And would other experts in your field similarly rely upon the same facts or data that you relied upon?
Yes, ma'am, of course.
And at the end of your investigation, did you make a conclusion?
I did. I was able to conclude that this was an outside job perpetrated by expert art thieves with no inside accomplice.
Now, moving on to your investigation, when did it begin?
Well, it began on the morning of May 1st, when I got a call from Sophia Reed informing me of the robbery. I arrived at the scene at about 8:19.
And what did you do when you arrived on the scene?
The first thing I did was assess the security room, which was a complete mess. There were metal and plastic bits covering the floor, and I bagged all of those for evidence to begin.
And did you end up finding out what those pieces were?
Yes, they were the pieces of the hard drive that stored the security footage, as well as the night guard's cell phones, which had been smashed.
After your inspection of the security room, what did you do next?
The next thing I did was send all the guards home because it had been a very long morning. And then I took one last run through the museum to make sure I hadn't missed anything before heading back to the police department.
And did you speak to anyone on the scene of the crime?
I did. I conducted 2 initial interviews, one of Eli Foy and the other of Mozzie.
And after your interviews, did you consider the night guards as suspects or accomplices?
I did not because there was no evidence pointing to them as suspects. However, it is proper procedure to investigate them thoroughly, so that's exactly what I did.
So what did you do to investigate the night guards?
Well, I first conducted multiple unannounced searches of both of their homes, and this did include their premises and their persons.
Did you find anything of value to the case in your searches?
No, ma'am, I did not.
What else did you do to investigate the night guards?
I also ran background checks on both of them and took up their laptops for more forensic testing.
And what were the results of the background checks?
Nothing negative. Eli Foy had a stellar background with the NYPD, multiple awards, no red flags, and Mozzie had nothing notable in her background.
And you mentioned that you sent the personal laptops to the forensic lab. Was there a forensic report made?
Yes, there was.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness of what has been already admitted as Exhibit 10?
You may.
Detective Dockray, is this that report?
Yes, it is.
And what do the labs say about the personal laptops?
You can see right here, it says, our lab did not identify anything suspicious or suggestive of participation in museum robbery.
And you mentioned that you picked up the pieces of the night guards' cell phones. Did you find any data from that?
No, that's right here. You can see it says, we were unable to pull any
Your
data
Honor,
from...
this has become cumulative. The witness is just reading from this already admitted document. If opposing counsel wants the witness to read from the document, I would ask that there are questions asked besides just having her read from the document.
Overrule.
So basically, they were unable to pull any data from either cell phone, and I was also able to call and confirm with the cell phone company that no calls or texts were made after 11:30 p.m. that night.
So overall, Detective Dockray, was there any physical forensic evidence that suggested that either of the night guard had anything to do with the robbery?
No.
Now, moving on to the rest of your investigation, did you speak to anyone else?
Yes. I also conducted an interview of Rasson, Crowe, who is the museum director.
Did you conduct this interview with someone else?
Yes, it was a joint interview with Renee Rousseau.
Did anything strange happen in those interactions?
Actually, when I introduced myself to Renee Rousseau, I informed her of some of the theories that I was looking into. And when I told her about these theories, she just rolled her eyes at me and overall seemed very displeased.
Were there other similar incidents involving Miss Rousseau?
Actually, yes. When I handed Rousseau a copy of this forensic report, she skimmed through it and then she made a strange comment. She said, "You know, cases like these are always inside jobs, right?" And then she just walked away.
And at this point in time, to your knowledge, had her investigation into the robbery concluded?
No, it was definitely still an ongoing investigation.
And then moving on to the final part of your investigation, did you investigate any other leads?
I did. I did look into Melissa Roberts, who was a former museum employee and had a very plausible motive.
Aside from Miss Roberts, was there anyone else?
Yes, I also looked into the Rexford Solutions employees who could have possibly had administrative access to the hard drive that night.
And finally, Detective Dockray, is this case still an ongoing investigation?
Yes, I am still actively looking for the perpetrators and have not made any arrests yet.
Thank you, Your Honor. I asked to publish Exhibit 10 to the jury, and I passed the witness.
All right. You may publish the exhibit to the jury.
Cross, Your Honor.
Yes.
Excuse me. Good evening, Detective. My name is Zoe Gamaros, and I'll be asking you some questions today.
Good evening. Nice to meet you.
You spoke on your direct examination that you worked at Farmville Police Department for 10 years, right?
Yes, ma'am. That's correct.
When you worked at Farmville, you worked at a desk job at the beginning, correct?
Yes, everyone's got to start somewhere, right?
And then you gave out traffic tickets, right?
Yes, another promotion.
You never worked as a patrol officer in those 10 years, right?
No, ma'am. I started that at Russellville.
You only started working as a patrol officer in 2019 at Russellville, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And after a single year of working as a patrol officer, you were promoted. Isn't that right?
Yes, ma'am, as would anyone else in my field.
You were promoted to lead investigator, right?
Yes.
You got that promotion because 2 detectives retired. Isn't that correct?
No, ma'am. I qualified for that position, and that's how I got it, not because 2 other detectives retired.
Have you previously testified that you were not you were promoted because there was an absence due to 2 detectives retiring, right?
No.
You've never said, have you previously testified that you were promoted because 2 detectives retired?
No, I have not testified that.
You give a Detective, in the course of your investigation, this is your first art theft, right?
Art theft investigation, yes, ma'am.
You made mistakes in your investigation, right?
I believe I made one small mistake of missing a screw. However, it did not impact the investigation in any way.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive. The witness went outside the scope of my question. It was a simple yes or no.
Overrule.
One of those mistakes was when you failed to collect a screw, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Another mistake was when you didn't search the guards before you let them leave the scene, right?
Yes, ma'am, I do regret that decision. However, it was still, I believe, okay to do at the time.
I want to talk about the deposit we heard about from Mr. Foy. That deposit was for over $1 million, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And you do not know where that $1 million came from, correct?
I know that it cleared his bank statement.
Well, you didn't investigate that $1 million deposit, right?
No, I did look into his financials and I found nothing.
You did not look into his bank records following that deposit, right?
Not following that deposit. However, the FBI did investigate his bank account and found nothing.
The FBI invested his bank account on May 1st, 2021, correct?
Correct.
And the deposit was made on May 3rd, 2021, right?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
So the FBI did not investigate that deposit, right?
No, however, it did clear his bank.
Well, you spoke with Eli Foy on May 4th, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
He didn't mention that deposit to you then, right?
No, ma'am, we're not really on.
You spoke with Eli Foy on May 6th, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And he still didn't mention that deposit to you. Isn't that right, Detective?
No, ma'am, as I've said, that was a personal decision of his and we're not on personal terms.
That deposit came 2 days after he was involved in a major theft at his place of work, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
We heard Mr. Crowe testify that you told him which 5 paintings were stolen when you called him on May 1st, 2021, right?
That's right.
When you received that call from Mr. Crowe, you had not checked out the museum yet, right?
No, however, I had the scene secured by my backup officers.
You said that Crowe called you and asked what art was stolen, but you had not checked out the scene, so you couldn't tell him what art was stolen, right?
Not yet, however, the scene was secured.
So you did not tell Mr. Crowe which 5 pieces were stolen before the claim was filed on May 1st, 2021, right?
No, ma'am, not that I recall.
No further questions, Your Honor. Pass the witness.
All right. Redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right. The witness may step down.
The plaintiff rests, Your Honor.
Your Honor, at this time, we call Merritt Mozzie to the stand. First, may I retrieve Exhibit 4 from the jury?
Yes, you may.
I will retrieve Exhibit 4 and Exhibit 1. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Hello, my name is Merritt Mozzie. I'm 25 years old. I'm a resident here in Russellville, Texoma. I am single. And I'm a former security guard of the Mozzie de Rousseau.
Were you trained for the position of a security guard at Musée d'Orsay?
Yes, for 4 weeks, policies and protocols were drilled into my head by none other than Eli Foy, actually.
Why did you resign from Musée d'Orsay?
The events that we are here to discuss today left me a broken man.
Let's talk about the robbery. What was the first thing that you recall that began the series of events?
At 3:30 a.m., not 1, but 2 police officers showed up at our exterior entrance, claiming that a cop had been shot, and they needed our security footage to catch this cop shooter.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has already been admitted as Exhibit 1?
You may.
Please use this throughout your testimony if you find it helpful.
Yes, thank you.
What happened when you saw these police officers?
Well, Eli Foy was very adamant about letting these officers into our interior hallway here. He instructed me to do so, and when I would not, he threatened me with my job. I was not about to do this because this was against protocol.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has already been admitted as Exhibit 4?
You may.
Looking at Exhibit 4, can you tell me how long Eli Foy was in the interior security hallway with the robbers?
Well, looking at these door logs, we can see that Eli Foy was with these robbers for a grand total of 3 minutes.
What was happening during that time?
Well, I could not hear some of their conversation.
So did you ever hear of any demand made from the robbers towards Eli Foy?
No, I heard no such thing.
Did you observe Eli Foy make any attempt to follow protocol?
From what I could see, no.
Well, what happened after the robbers were allowed inside?
Well, once we were all inside the security room here, they asked if anybody else was in the museum, to which Eli Foy very quickly responded, no. They then drew their guns and said this is a robbery.
What followed directly after?
Well, after they drew guns on us, they asked for our ID badges and our phones. I handed mine to Eli Foy, who handed them to the robbers. They then smashed our phones on the ground and took our ID badges. They then went to a computer and typed something. They then smashed a hard drive on the ground. Later, I'd find out that this was them erasing all of our video storage.
Mr. Mozzie, did you know where this hard drive was located?
No, I did not.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with Exhibit 8?
You may.
Let the record reflect that I am showing opposing counsel. I now hand you Exhibit 8. Can you identify it?
Yes, this is a black folio or something of a black folio that was taken that night.
Is this a true and accurate depiction of a photograph of the folio?
Yes, it is.
Well, what happened next after the robbers broke the hard drive?
Well, they then took a folio like this, which was weird.
Objection, Your Honor. This folio has not been entered into evidence, and therefore the witness cannot testify to the folio.
Response?
This witness, well, the witness is allowed to say what happened after.
Response, Your Honor. The witness
No.
clearly said they took something like this folio, therefore the witness is testifying to the folio, and it has not been admitted into evidence yet.
Well, I'm going to overrule the objection. The witness hasn't said this is the folio. So your objection is overruled.
Let me go back to my question. What happened next?
Well, they then took something like this black folio, which was weird.
Why was this unusual?
Well, how would they know where it was? I mean, it was in an office.
Your Honor, at this time, we offer Exhibit 8 into evidence.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 8 is admitted.
Well, what happened after they found this folio?
After they found this folio, then they proceeded to tie me up. First by my hands, then by my feet, then by my hands and my feet together and threw me into office like an animal.
Did you ever see Eli Foy getting tied up?
No, I cannot say that I did.
Looking at the door logs, we see that Eli Foy's door was open during the robbery. Was the door to your office ever opened?
No, I was not checked on at any point of the night.
Did you see or hear anything unusual while you were tied up?
Where I could not see anything, I was in a dark room, but I could hear some shuffling from the security room.
Are you able to identify whether that shuffling was Eli Foy or the robbers?
There's no way to say for sure.
Were you ever finally rescued?
Thank heavens I was. At 7 a.m., Clay Crummy, a fellow guard, rescued me from my personal nightmare. I was then cleared by the EMTs, questioned by Detective Dockray, and sent home.
Were you searched before you left that day?
No, I was not searched.
Did you sustain any injuries from the robbery?
Well, thank heavens, nothing major, but I did sustain some pretty severe bruising on my wrists from the zip ties that were used against me.
Did you observe Eli Foy have the same bruising as you?
You know, I can't say that I did.
Are you being compensated for your time today?
I am, but it has nothing to do with my testimony.
Well, why are you testifying here today?
I'm here to tell the truth.
No further questions, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Mozzie, you just testified on direct that you are being compensated by Seascape Insurance Company, correct?
Yes, I am.
Now, before this moment, you worked as a security guard for minimum wage, correct?
At the Mozzie Rousseau, yes.
And now you are currently unemployed, correct?
I have quit my job, yes.
And you are getting paid $300 an hour from Seascape Insurance Company, correct?
Yes, I needed to pay my bills.
Yeah, you're currently in desperate need of money to pay rent, correct?
I need to pay rent, yes.
Now, you've so far prepared 25 hours for preparations, correct?
Yes, it is a 6-page testimony that I made.
That means that you have been paid already $7,500, correct?
This is true, but again, it has nothing to do with my testimony.
But that wasn't my question, Mr. Mozzie. This is what you've gotten already, right?
Yes, this is true.
And now you are going to be paid an additional $300 for sitting here and testifying today, correct?
I'm being paid for my time, yes.
Okay. Now, let's talk specifically about the robbery. This was your first time on the night shift, correct?
Yes, it was.
And when you first saw the robbers on the video monitors, you thought that they were cops, correct?
I did.
And it wasn't until the robbers pulled their guns on you and Mr. Foy where you thought they were actually robbers, correct?
Yes.
And you and Mr. Foy were in that same position with guns pulled to your head, correct?
Yes, we were physically standing in the same position.
But you both had guns pulled to your head, correct?
Yes.
Now, it is your belief that Mr. Foy might not have been tied up right away, correct?
It is my suspicion.
But as you pointed out on direct, when you were in office room 2, you couldn't see anything from the locked office, correct?
That's right, I could not see anything.
Now, let's talk about the next morning. You were interviewed by Detective Dockray, correct?
Yes, I was.
And then you saw Detective Dockray again later that day when she came back to search your house, correct?
Yes.
Yet you never told Detective Dockray about your suspicions about Mr. Foy, correct?
No, I was still a bit scrambled at the time.
So that is a yes to my question. You never told Detective Dockray even though you saw her twice that day, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
In fact, you'd only told Miss Rousseau about your suspicions, correct?
Yes, once I had recuperated from the night.
In fact, after you quit your job at the robbery, you were on a call with Miss Rousseau where you said that your suspicions had only grown, correct?
Yes, as I started to piece things together.
But it is your belief that you can't even say whether Mr. Foy was actually involved because you don't know, correct?
I cannot say anything for 100%.
But that is a belief that you have, that you don't know whether Mr. Foy was actually involved or not, correct?
I believe that he was.
It is your belief that you don't know actually definitively whether he was involved or not, correct?
I can't say for certain, but I have my suspicions.
So that is a yes to my question then?
That I don't know?
That you don't know definitively if he was involved or not, correct?
Yes, I was locked in a room.
In fact, it is also your belief that he might have been in the wrong place at the wrong time, just like you, correct?
It is possible.
And that is a belief that you have, correct?
It's possible.
Right. Your Honor, I pass the witness.
No redirect, Your Honor.
Okay, the witness may step down.
At this time, the defense calls Remington Stoll to the stand. And may I retrieve exhibits 1 and 9?
Yes, you may.
Oh, sorry, 1 second. May I retrieve exhibits 1 and 9?
Yes.
Thank you. There you go. Oh, just something. Do you have exhibit 1? Yep, I do right here. I believe that I have exhibit 9. Okay. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Remington Stoll, but you can call me Remy. Quite like Remy.
What do you do for a living?
I'm currently a consultant for Seascape Insurance, but I've worked with Interpol and other government agencies, as well as museums and private collections across the world.
What have you done while working with Interpol and other government agencies?
Oh, ma'am, I have solved 6 major art heist cases with Interpol.
What have you done working with museums and other private collections?
With the museums and private collections, my job is to simply beef up security protocol to make sure theft will not occur.
How did you get your start investigating art heists?
That's quite a doozy, I would say. I've had a love of art since I would say maybe age 10. Now, many would say that love drives you to do some very crazy things. My love for art drew me to steal. I stole art. I was perhaps the best art thief in the world at the time.
What did you do to garner that reputation as one of the best art thieves in the world?
In my prime, I stole 2 beautiful Picasso paintings from the Spanish Museum.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has been admitted as Exhibit 9?
You may.
Do you recognize this, Miss Stoll?
Oh, of course I do. It's about me.
And in that theft of 2 Picassos, how many screws did you have to remove from the painting?
I removed 24 screws in a 22-minute time frame.
So how many minutes is that for removing each screw?
Roughly a little bit less than a minute, I would say.
And at what caliber were you operating when you committed that heist?
Oh, it says that I was one of the most skilled thieves in the world at the time.
I would like to move on to this investigation. Okay. What, if any, involvement did you have in Seascape's investigation of Musée d'Orsay's theft?
I'm assessing this robbery to see how the robbers may have breached the museum, gotten in and stolen the art.
How did you become aware of this theft?
I received a phone call the morning of May 1st from my associate, Renee Rousseau, and she had just received a claim filed from the Musée d'Orsay.
What steps did you follow in beginning your assessment of the evidence?
The first step was simple: assess the security protocol as well as the layout of the museum.
Referring to Exhibit 1,
yeah.
What did you learn from the system layout of Musée d'Orsay?
The Musée d'Orsay, I would say, was like a crisp cookie. Maybe like an Oreo, you could say. On the outside, it's very hard and difficult to enter. But once through the security protocol, it's easy to steal from.
In your expert opinion, based upon your education, background, and training, what did you think of the thieves' plan in this theft?
I thought the thieves' plan was brilliant, actually. I mean, it worked. They stole 5 beautiful paintings. But I don't think it was capable without an inside accomplice.
And what is the basis for your opinion that it wasn't possible without an inside accomplice?
Oh, there's many things. I can start simply with this interior hallway trip up. Now, no professional thief would have risked getting into this interior hallway because you would have been trapped without knowing that you could get through the other side. An insider would have simply been needed to make sure that you could get through both the exterior and the interior door without getting caught.
Were you able to rely upon any security footage in this investigation?
Unfortunately not. It had been wiped during the robbery.
We heard today about the destroyed hard drive. Did that play a role in your assessment of the evidence?
Of course it did. You see, the hard drive was found in a nondescriptive cabinet, but the thieves automatically knew where this cabinet was and reached for it almost immediately and smashed it on the ground.
What about the cloud being wiped? How did that play a role in your assessment?
The cloud is supposedly protected by a 25-character password. Now, we all know our ABCs, and that's 26 characters. We learned that in, say, primary school. Now, Eli Foy was there the day of the password change, as well as Eli Foy was there the day of the robbery. Eli Foy had the opportunity to simply memorize the password.
What steps needed to physically happen for the art to be removed from the museum and stolen by these thieves?
Removing the art off the walls is a very cautious and tedious process. It takes careful consideration. First, you must remove the paintings off the wall, and then take the screws out, which removes the frame. Then take the beautiful work of art and place it in the folio without damaging it.
How many screws were removed from the paintings in this theft?
Minimally, I would say 75. That's about 10 to 20 per painting.
So if it was more than 75, how many do you think it would be?
Maybe about 100, 20 times 5.
How long would it have taken for these thieves to steal the art in this case?
Oh, simply more than the time that they had. They had 60 minutes to remove the supposed 75 screws. It doesn't make sense. It's not feasible with just 2 people. That's where I think the third party comes into play.
Do you have a suspect for who that third party was?
I do, in fact. I suspect Eli Foy to be involved.
What is the basis for that suspect?
Eli Foy was needed for simply labor, to remove the art from the still life collection, as well as to enter through this interior hallway, as I stated. Eli Foy also could have given the robbers the password, as well as where the nondescriptive cabinet enclosing the hard drive was found.
Did you come to a final conclusion in your assessment?
I did.
And what was your final conclusion, Ms. Stoll?
My final conclusion was simply the third party was involved, and that is Eli Foy.
No further questions, Your Honor. Past witness. At this time, may I publish Exhibits 1 and 9?
You may.
Right.
As well as Exhibit 4 and 8.
Yeah.
You may.
They're all up here.
Cross-examination, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Good evening, Ms. Stoll. I'm just going to ask you a few questions.
Lovely to meet you.
Let's first talk about your thieving background.
Yeah,
you were convicted for art theft,
Objection,
weren't you?
Your Honor. This record has been expunged, and in accordance with Rule 609C, it is inadmissible here today.
Response?
Response, Your Honor. This is still the background of the witness, and since the opposing counsel has established the foundation to establish this witness as an expert witness, her background is extremely relevant, and I won't be using it for any prejudicial value, Your Honor.
Response, Your Honor. It is inadmissible because the record is expunged, and attacking the witness's background attacks her credibility. It's the same thing as attacking this witness for truthfulness, and that is inadmissible because it is an expunged record.
Your Honor, they also opened the door on direct examination by talking about the witness's thieving background.
Response, Your Honor.
You may.
Talking about her background does not open the door to an expunged record being admitted into evidence here today. It is inadmissible because it's expunged, and in accordance with Rule 609C, it is not allowed to be discussed in court today.
I'll sustain the objection.
You didn't just steal art, did you, Miss Stoll?
No.
You stole cars, jewelry, and even purses.
Yep. It's gotten me to the point that I'm at today.
And you've sold most of the things you stole, really.
Yeah, that's a funny play on words.
So you have sold some of the things you've stolen, right?
I'm sorry, can you say the question again, please?
You've sold the things you've stolen, right?
Yeah, I would say, in my past.
And you actually got caught because you tried to sell your paintings, right?
Yep, they found me.
And you even joined the private sector of work because that's where the money is, right?
That's one of the reasons. Don't you always want to make more money in the job that you do?
You are being compensated for the time and testimony that you're making today, right?
Yes, this is my job. I get paid to do my job.
You got approximately $500,000 just for making an analysis, right?
Yep, all part of the job.
And your analysis is quite important to Seascape, isn't it?
Yep, I'm an art thief expert. That's my opinion.
And you would say that they relied on your analysis to deny the claim, right?
They take my initial opinion into consideration, yep.
Now, because you're testifying here today, you get another $500,000, right?
Yep, all part of my lovely job.
And it helps fund your very expensive lifestyle, right?
I would say I have an expensive lifestyle, yeah.
Now, moving on to why you believe that the robbery at the Musée d'Orsay had to be an inside job. One of the reasons why you believe that the robbers had to have a third man was that they couldn't have unscrewed all the paintings within their time frame, right?
Yeah, that time frame that I gave during my direct that they give is just to remove...
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive after the word yeah.
Your Honor, the witness was clarifying the question, or clarifying her answer because opposing counsel's question was confusing.
Response, Your Honor. They can clarify the answer on redirect if they would like.
I'll sustain the objection.
Please try to answer my questions with a yes or a no, Ms. Stoll.
Lovely.
Now, there are approximately, 75 screws found at the scene of the crime?
Yeah, that's what they found, but it's 10 to 20 per
Let's go with what they found. Divided equally between the two thieves, that's approximately 38 screws per thief, right?
Yep, pretty sure that's right.
Yeah. And so, even in your heist, you unscrewed 24 screws in 22 minutes, right?
Right, I was the best in the world.
You were the best in the world, and you took a week to prepare for that.
Yes, I did my research.
And professional thieves, like the ones that robbed the Musée d'Orsay, usually take months to prepare for a heist like this.
Yes, a professional thief would need to prepare.
Prepare for months, right?
You could say.
Yeah, and let's go back to the 38 screws. 38 screws in 60 minutes is more than a minute per screw, right?
Yes, but that time
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive after the word yes.
I'll sustain the objection.
Now, I also want to talk about the forensic evidence and the evidence of a hack at the Musée d'Orsay. Your Honor, I'd like to approach the witness of what has been admitted as Exhibit 10. May I retrieve it from the jury?
Yes, you may.
You have a nice display.
So I'm going to be reading aloud from Laptop Computer from Museum. Despite the assistance of the FBI, we were unable to determine how the cloud server had been accessed, including which password was used to access the cloud server. Did I read that correctly?
Yep, you read it perfectly. Proud of you.
Thank you. Now, Rexford Solutions has an administrative password, right?
Yes.
So there is a possibility, according to the FBI and this report, that that password was used.
I guess, sure.
And are you aware of Melissa Roberts?
I am aware of Melissa Roberts. It was not my job title to investigate her, though.
Yeah, but you are aware of Renee Rousseau's investigation and Detective Dockray's investigation, right?
Yes, I was here sitting in trial.
Yeah. And so a former employee of the Musée d'Orsay would have knowledge of the security protocol, right?
Yes, she was part of the security team.
Yeah, and a former museum guard would have knowledge of where the hard drive is stolen in the security office, right?
Yes.
And a former museum guard would have knowledge of what the cloud server actually is, right?
Ma'am, I don't know the knowledge of the guards. I'm not a guard.
I'm just asking to your personal knowledge. An employee would know the security system and know...
Your Honor, question calls for speculation. Ms. Stoll is not a former guard of the museum, never has been, and does not have personal knowledge of the security system.
Response, Your Honor. The witness has already testified to knowing about Renee Rousseau's investigation, Detective Dockray's investigation, and has also been established as an expert. So I'm just asking to her expert opinion, Your Honor.
Overall.
Can you restate the question, please, love?
Yeah. So a former security guard for the Musée d'Orsay would have knowledge
of where the cloud server is, right?
I don't know what the knowledge is of the security guards.
With that, Your Honor, I pass the witness.
All right. Redirect.
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right. You may step down.
Lovely, thank you.
Your Honor, before we call our last witness, may I retrieve Exhibit 4 from the jury?
Yes.
Sorry, Your Honor, 1 minute. The defense calls Renee Rousseau to the stand. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
Good evening. My name is Renee Rousseau. I am actually from France, and I am the lead investigator and loss prevention specialist for Seascape Property and Casualty Insurance Company.
Would you briefly describe your educational background for the members of the jury?
Of course, I have a bachelor's in art history and a master's in insurance risk management, both from Harvard University, where I graduated in the top 5% of my class both times.
How did you begin working with Seascape Insurance?
I took an internship at Seascape during my master's program and began working there shortly after I graduated. I've worked at Seascape for 10 years, and I have had my current position for 6.
Have you ever testified in trials like these?
Yes, I've testified in trials like these 12 times for Seascape, and we have prevailed in all but one.
Why are you here today, Ms. Rousseau?
I was sent by Seascape to investigate the claims that was filed by the Musée d'Orsay.
What do the responsibilities of a lead investigator include?
I investigate claims, significant claims, and determine whether the insured should be paid based on the coverage and exclusions of the applicable insurance policy.
Do you have a routine that you follow in your investigations?
Yes, I do.
What is that procedure?
I contact Remington Stoll, a consultant with Seascape, for an initial opinion, and then I visit the scene of the crime where I collect evidence, interview witnesses, and take thorough notes to document my findings.
Was this case, the claim made by Musée d'Orsay, any different for you?
No.
Would you recognize a copy of your notes if I were to show them to you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has been marked as Exhibit 7?
You may.
Opposing counsel. Ms. Rousseau, what is Exhibit 7?
Exhibit 7 is my notes that I took during my investigation of the Musée d'Orsay.
Were these made in the course of regularly conducted business?
Yes, they were.
Were these made at or near the time of the event of the robbery, May 1st, 2021?
Absolutely, they were.
Were these made by a person of knowledge?
I made them, so yes.
Are you the custodian of this document?
Yes, I am.
The defense offers Exhibit 7 into evidence as a business record for Seascape Insurance.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, Exhibit 7 is admitted.
Using this exhibit, how did you begin your investigation on the claim made by Musée d'Orsay?
Well, I received notice of the Musée d'Orsay's insurance claim around 1:05 p.m. and contacted Remington Stoll a little bit after 1:30, where I got her initial opinion.
What was that initial opinion?
Stoll stated that using an accomplice is how they would have committed a similar robbery to this one.
After this phone call, what did you do?
After that phone call, I needed to get to the scene of the crime, so I took a flight down to Texoma.
Did you interact with the detective on the case, Detective Dockray, once arriving at the museum?
Yes, after I arrived at the museum, I interacted with Detective Dockray.
What did you make of this interaction?
It was clear to me from these interactions that Detective Dockray did not have experience like I did investigating art heists like this one.
Do you know if Detective Dockray had ever previously investigated an art theft before?
Detective Dockray had never previously investigated an art theft before.
Were you able to see Detective Dockray's notes at the time?
I asked at the time to see their notes, and Detective Dockray would not let me, but at a later date I was given a copy of their notes.
What did you make of those notes?
We had some inconsistencies between our notes, and it was concerning to me, especially the inconsistencies between interviews that we conducted together.
Back to the day of May 1st, 2021. After that interaction, Did you discover anything else on your walk around the museum?
While I was on my walk around the museum, I was guided by a police officer. I found a screw that the police had failed to collect when looking for screws for evidence. This was incredibly concerning to me, as physical evidence is incredibly important in cases like these.
Did you make any other significant discoveries on May 1st?
Yes, I found that the hard drive that was supposed to collect video footage of the robbery had been destroyed during the robbery, and the cloud server that was also supposed to collect this video footage had been wiped and disabled from saving any further video footage.
Was there an investigation into the possibility of a hacking?
Yes, there was.
Would you recognize a copy of that report if I were to show it to you?
Yes, I would.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has already been admitted as Exhibit 10?
You may.
Ms. Rousseau, what is Exhibit 10?
Exhibit 10 is a copy of the Texoma Forensic Testing Laboratory's report.
Was this exhibit pertinent to your investigation?
Yes, it was.
How so?
This exhibit analyzed the physical evidence that was provided and also gave me an analysis of the security computer in the museum.
What was the analysis pertaining to the password?
With the assistance of the FBI, the Texoma Forensic Testing Laboratory was unable to determine how the cloud server had been accessed.
What does that mean?
That they do not know how the cloud server was accessed.
Did you find in your investigation who knew that security password?
Yes, I found that Rasson, Crowe, the director of the museum, knew the security password.
Did you find who was in the room when that password was changed?
I found that Eli Foy, the chief of security, and one of the guards present during the robbery was in the room when the password was changed.
Right. Did you further your investigation the next day, May 2nd, 2021?
Yes, I did.
What steps did you take on this day?
On May 2nd of 2021, I interviewed both Eli Foy and Mozzie, the two guards on duty during the robbery.
Would a map of the museum help further your testimony?
Yes, it would.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has already been admitted as Exhibit 1?
You may.
Ms. Rousseau, using Exhibit 1, could you please point out what significant information you received from both the guards on duty that night?
Yes, in both Eli Foy and Mozzie's interviews, I found that the robbers entered through this security entrance at the back of the museum.
Why was that pertinent to your investigation?
This security entrance is actually composed of two doors, an interior door and an exterior door with an interior hallway in between the two. To get through these doors, you need a facial scan in the system, a fingerprint scan in the system, or a badge of a museum security guard.
Did you find Exhibit 4, the door log, to be helpful in your investigation?
Yes, I did.
Your Honor, I may approach the witness with what has already been admitted as Exhibit 4.
You may.
Using the door log, Ms. Rousseau, how is this significant in your investigation?
This door log gave me my most concrete timeline of the events of May 1st, including actual times.
What findings did you make of this exhibit?
I found that Eli Foy first let the robbers into the museum at 3:32 a.m. when he opened the exterior security door. He then spent 3 minutes with these robbers in the interior hallway before opening the interior security door.
Did you find in your investigation in these 3 minutes that Eli Foy made any attempt to follow protocol by calling Rasson Crowe?
I found that Eli Foy did not make any attempt to follow protocol.
Did you find that Eli Foy made any attempts to call police to verify that these were real police officers in front of him?
I did not.
What else did you find significant about this exhibit?
On this exhibit, it states that the door to Office 2, where Mozzie was kept, was opened at 3:46 a.m., and the door to Office 1, where Eli Foy was allegedly kept all night, was not opened until 3:54 a.m.
What does that mean?
Office 1 and Office 2 on this map are here and here. They are not an 8-minute walk apart.
Who was making that walk at the time?
Just Eli Foy and the two robbers.
Did the door to Office 1, where Eli Foy was supposedly tied up, ever open again?
Yes, it opened again at 4:52 a.m., very shortly before the two robbers left the museum.
Did you find in your investigation that anyone was able to see Eli Foy tied up that night?
No one was able to see Eli Foy tied up until the morning after the robbery occurred, around 7:30 a.m.
Did you find that either of the night guards sustained any injuries?
Yes, I found that Mozzie had some pretty severe bruising on his wrist from having been tied up all night, and Eli Foy had more minor red marks.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of foundation as to how Ms. Rousseau knows this. Ms. Rousseau hasn't testified that she was present when Mr. Mozzie was let out of those zip ties, so she can't testify to what Mr. Mozzie's condition was as after he was let out.
Response?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness is referring to the statements in Exhibit 7 that has been admitted from both Merritt Mozzie and Eli Foy that stated what injuries they sustained. Furthermore, the foundation has been laid that Renee Rousseau interviewed both the night guards on duty the day following the robbery and therefore had personal observation of both men.
Overall?
You were talking about physical injuries.
Yes, Merritt Mozzie had some pretty severe bruising on his wrists, yet Eli Foy had only a few red marks.
What does that mean?
It's suspicious to me that two men who were supposedly tied up for the same amount of time sustained such drastically different injuries.
What, if anything, if any way, did you find Rasson Crowe to have been involved in this robbery?
Rasson Crowe is the director of the Musée d'Orsay and received a threat for high-value businesses about 2 weeks before the robbery occurred.
Why was that important to you?
Rasson Crowe consulted on this threat with Eli Foy, and they both decided not to increase security measures after reading this threat.
Do you know who all was involved in the decision to not increase police patrol days before the robbery?
Yes, Rasson Crowe and Eli Foy.
What, if anything, did Eli Foy have invested in to have been involved in this robbery?
Money. Of course, a mysterious deposit of over $1 million appeared in Eli Foy's bank accounts mere days after the robbery occurred. Eli Foy has no record as to where this money came from.
Did you, in your investigation, find any record of where this money came from?
None whatsoever.
Do you know, you read Detective Dockray's notes, as you said. Do you know if Detective Dockray found any record of where this money may have come from?
Detective Dockray did not.
Did Eli Foy volunteer this information in your interview with him?
No.
Ms. Rousseau, did you come to a final conclusion in this case?
Yes, I did.
When was the first time that Eli Foy ever mentioned that when he was supposedly tied up, that his door ever opened again?
Today, in his addendum, after reading all of the evidence, including the door logs, which details this happening.
When was the first time that Eli Foy mentioned that he ever handled Merritt Mozzie's ID badge, the one that helped the guards escape the museum?
Today, after reading all of the evidence, including the forensic report, which details Eli Foy's fingerprints being on the badge.
You said that you came to a final conclusion using all the evidence, your background training and expertise. What conclusion did you come to?
Eli Foy, an employee at the time, knowingly participated in the robbery on the early morning hours of May 1st, 2021.
Was Eli Foy's testimony consistent with the evidence?
No.
How so?
Eli Foy stated that he made his $1 million deposit because he was upset that we at Seascape, were accusing him of aiding in the heist. However, we at Seascape did not accuse Eli Foy at all until May 10th, a week after this deposit was made.
What did that mean for your investigation?
I cannot trust the word of someone who has lied to me.
What did that mean for Seascape Insurance?
Seascape denied the claim because a clear exclusion occurred.
Nothing further, Your Honor. At this time, may I publish Exhibits 7, 10, 4, and 1 to the jury?
You may. Cross-examination?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Rousseau. My name is Prisha Mehta. I'm just going to be asking some questions today to clarify your testimony. You just told us on direct examination that you believe Mr. Crowe was involved in the robbery.
I did not say that.
You just testified that you believe that Mr. Crowe and Mr. Eli Foy were involved in the robbery together, right?
I did not say that. Would you like me to say what I said, or?
Ms. Rousseau, I believe you just told the jury that Mr. Crowe was working with Mr. Foy on the robbery, right?
I did not say that.
Is it your testimony that you did not just testify that Mr. Crowe was involved in the robbery as well?
Would you like me to say what I said, or?
No, that is not necessary.
I did not say that Mr. Crowe was in on the robbery, no.
Now, let's talk about the insurance policy, Ms. Rousseau. You're extensively familiar with it, right?
I am.
'Cause you're the lead investigator, right?
For Seascape, I am.
Now, you agree that this policy is a valid contract, right?
I do.
You agree that Seascape refused to pay under the policy, right?
We did not pay. That's correct.
And you agree that the Musée d'Orso suffered losses, right?
They suffered the loss of 5 pieces of art.
So that's a yes to my question.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now let's move on to the hard stuff, Ms. Rousseau. 7.5 million, that number means something to you, doesn't it?
I believe that's the bonus I will receive in this case.
Right, Ms. Rousseau. Anytime you deny a claim, Seascape pays you a bonus, do they not?
An invalid claim, yes.
They pay you a bonus of 7.5% of the claim that you successfully deny, right?
Yes, of the value of the claim.
And Ms. Rousseau, in 2019, you received about $1.1 million in bonuses from denying claims, right?
I believe so, yes.
In 2020, you received about $1.8 million from denying claims, right?
That is correct, I did.
Ms. Rousseau, this claim today is for $100 million, right?
Yes, it is.
So if I'm doing the math correctly, Ms. Rousseau, you'll walk out of this courtroom with $7.5 million if you manage to deny this, if Seascape manages to deny this claim, right?
That is correct.
Now, Ms. Rousseau, let's talk about how you've started your investigation with Seascape. Your Honor, at this time, permission to retrieve the Exhibit 7 from the jury, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
These are your investigation notes, right?
That's correct, they are.
All right. Ms. Rousseau, let's take a look at how you started your investigation. You started your investigation on May 1st, right?
That is correct, I did.
And the first thing you did, like you told us on direct, was you consulted with Remington Stoll, right?
That's correct.
And after that, you decided to board a flight to Texoma to go to the museum, right?
Yes, I needed to visit the scene.
Now, to be clear, Ms. Rousseau, at the time you boarded the flight, you hadn't stepped foot into the museum, right?
No, I was on my way there.
You hadn't interviewed any eyewitnesses, right?
No, I was on my way to the museum.
You hadn't spoken with Detective Dockray, right?
No, I was on my way.
You hadn't spoken with Mr. Foy, right?
No, again, I was on my way.
You hadn't spoken with Mr. Crowe?
Not yet. I was on my way to the museum to do so.
Ms. Rousseau, you didn't even know who Mr. Foy was at this point.
I was aware the 2 guards were there, but no.
So that's a yes to my question. You didn't even know who Mr. Foy was at this point.
That's correct.
But let's take a look at what you wrote, Ms. Rousseau. 3:55 p.m., boarded flight from NYC to Texoma to inspect museum and interview witnesses. Based on Stoll's initial assessment, focused to be on guards on duty during time of robbery. One must have been involved. I read that correctly, right, Ms. Rousseau?
Yes, you did.
So, Ms. Rousseau, this robbery was an inside job to you before you even knew who Mr. Foy was.
That was an initial opinion.
So that's a yes to my question.
The initial opinion, yes.
Okay, let's talk about how you investigated this initial opinion, Ms. Rousseau. You believe your investigation was more thorough than Detective Dockray's.
I believe it was thorough, yes.
Ms. Rousseau, you scoped out the museum as part of your investigation, right?
That's correct, I did.
You checked out the frames that the paintings were stolen from?
I did.
And when you did, you noticed fingerprint residue on them, right?
I believe I did, yes.
Ms. Rousseau, you didn't request a forensic test to test those fingerprints, did you?
No, a forensic lab report was later given to me.
That was my question. My question was not whether or not anything was later given to you. When you saw those fingerprint residues, you didn't request, as part of your investigation, to test those fingerprints, right?
I did not.
In fact, you didn't think it was even necessary.
You could say that, sure.
Sure, so you didn't think it was necessary to test fingerprint residue found on the frames?
I just said that.
You're also familiar with Melissa Roberts, right?
I am.
She's a former employee of the Musée d'Orsay, right?
Yes, I believe she is.
A security guard just like Mr. Eli Foy.
Or Mr. Merritt Mozzie, yes.
So that's a yes.
Yes, I said yes.
Ms. Rousseau, you didn't make an attempt to contact Melissa Roberts, right?
No, I did not.
You didn't make an attempt to reach out to her?
No, I did not.
In fact, you denied your claim before you even reviewed Detective Dockray's notes about Melissa Roberts, right?
That's correct.
And Ms. Rousseau, you were in the courtroom when Ms. Stoll gave her testimony today, right?
Ms. Stoll? Yes, I was.
And you were here when she was asked about Rexford Solutions, right?
Yes, I was.
You were here when they asked her, when my co-counsel asked her whether or not it is possible that Rexford Solutions could have leaked their administrative password, right?
I was there for that.
And since you were there for that, Ms. Rousseau, you know that your expert security consultant testified, yes, I guess so, that is possible, right?
In response to what? I'm sorry, I forgot the question you're referring to.
Okay, you forgot the question. Let me remind you. The question was, it is possible, the question that Mr. Stoll was asked was, it is possible that the Rexford Solutions could have leaked their administrative password, right?
Yes.
And to that, she responded, I guess so, that is possible, right?
That's correct, she did.
Ms. Rousseau, you didn't even attempt to contact the Rexford Solutions employees as part of your investigation, right?
I did not.
You didn't attempt to interview them?
No.
But Ms. Rousseau, you know that those employees, they know a password to that cloud, right?
They know a password, that's correct.
Now, Ms. Rousseau, you didn't take these steps in your investigation, but Detective Dockray took those steps, right?
Are you referring to interviewing the Melissa Roberts?
Yes, Ms. Rousseau. Detective Dockray interviewed Melissa Roberts, right?
No, she did not.
She attempted to contact Melissa Roberts, right?
Yes, she did. She was unsuccessful at interviewing
She
her.
interviewed the Rexford Solutions employees, right?
Yes, she did.
She also conducted forensic tests on the frames, right?
Yes, she did.
She also conducted home searches of Mr. Foy, right?
Yes, and Mr. Mozzie.
She searched Mr. Foy's property the day of the robbery, right?
That's correct.
She searched Mr. Foy. She searched Mr. Foy's laptop and cell phones, right?
Yes.
So, Ms. Rousseau, you know that when those frames were tested, none of Mr. Foy's fingerprints were found, right?
Yes, I'm aware of that.
None of Mr. Foy's DNA was found, right?
I am also aware of that.
None of Mr. Foy's hair fibers were found, right?
I'm aware of that, yes.
And you're also aware when they searched his home the day of the robbery, unannounced, they found nothing, right?
I am aware of that fact.
And you're also aware that they searched Mr. Foy's house 2 more times after that, right?
I'm aware.
They found nothing.
I'm aware of that, yes.
You're also aware that they searched Mr. Foy's cell phone records from the night of the robbery, right?
Yes, starting at 11:30 on April 30th, yes.
They found nothing, right?
After 11:30, that's correct.
Ms. Rousseau, you're aware that the FBI consulted with the Russellville Police Department on this case, right?
Yes, I'm aware of the FBI's involvement.
And you're aware the FBI concluded that it was, they were inconclusive as to whether or not the cloud was hacked, right?
Yes, they did say they were inconclusive.
But Ms. Rousseau, you're more confident than the FBI.
I don't think I would say that, no.
You just told us on direct examination that you are confident that Mr. Foy was the one who gave the password which allowed the robbers to enter into the cloud, right?
I am confident of that, yes.
That's not what the FBI concluded, right?
The FBI was inconclusive.
So the FBI is not as confident as you, right?
In my personal conclusion, I suppose the FBI would not be as confident as me in my own conclusion.
To be clear, Ms. Rousseau, The Russellville Police Department hasn't made any arrests, right?
No, they have not.
They have cleared Mr. Eli Foy, right?
They have.
Mr. Rousseau, you're the only Seascape is the only investigative party currently that suspects Mr. Foy, right?
I believe so.
I pass the witness, Your Honor.
Redirect.
Yes, Your Honor. Before I begin, may I retrieve Exhibit 10?
You may.
Mr. Rousseau, the plaintiff brought up on your cross-examination that, almost over here, that Detective Dockray attempted to interview Melissa Roberts. Did the notes on this, this attempt change your conclusion in any way?
No, not at all. Melissa Roberts would not speak to Detective Dockray.
Opposing counsel also brought up the fact that about Rexford Solutions and a possible password. What password is that Rexford Solutions knew?
Rexford Solutions had access to an admin password.
Was there ever an investigation into whether or not this password had been used?
Yes, Rexford Solutions conducted an independent internal investigation as to whether or not this password was used.
What was that conclusion about the admin password?
They denied that the admin password was used.
What is the difference between, opposing counsel needs some refreshing on this, what's the difference between an initial opinion and a final conclusion?
An initial opinion is made with just the bare bones facts of the case I had at the time, and a final conclusion is made with all of the evidence that I collected during the course of my investigation.
Along with all the searches that were conducted against Eli Foy, what did they find when they searched bank records?
In Eli Foy's bank records, which were searched, I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
What suspicious amounts did they find, if any?
Objection, Your Honor. Outside the scope of my cross-examination, I did not refer to any bank records in my cross-examination, so those cannot be elicited on redirect.
Response.
Your Honor, opposing counsel went through different searches saying that nothing was found, and this is in the scope of the redirect, showing that actually in the same investigation there was evidence found, digital evidence.
May I respond, Your Honor?
You may.
I believe the searches I were referring to are physical searches that Detective Dockray conducted of Mr. Foy's house. I did not once bring up bank records, Your Honor, or any searches into Mr. Foy's bank account. That is beyond the scope of my cross-examination.
I'll sustain the objection.
Your Honor, move to strike any offending testimony.
Any testimony regarding the bank account is struck.
What final conclusion did you come to based upon your experience and training?
Based upon my experience and training and all of the evidence I collected, I have found that Eli Foy acted in concert with the two robbers in the early morning hours of May 1st.
Did the concrete evidence support this conclusion?
Yes, it did.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
Recross.
Brief recross, Your Honor. Mr. Rousseau, you just told us that Melissa Roberts, those notes Detective Dockray had, didn't change your mind, right?
That's correct, they didn't.
But to be clear, Mr. Rousseau, you didn't even review that part of Detective Dockray's notes before you denied the claim, right?
I did not have access to them yet.
Pass the witness.
All right. The witness may step down.
Because you need them.
All right. You may take a moment before closing argument.
Your Honor, may I retrieve Exhibit 1, 4, and 10?
You may.
Hey, may I retrieve Exhibit 2 from the jury, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Someone help me with this real quick. Oh, now my hands up. Good. Okay. God, I hate that I have to do this.
I'm ready to proceed with closing arguments, Your Honor.
Okay, as
One
soon
second, Your
as,
Honor.
as soon as council is seated, you may begin.
No, I need Clifton. I need both.
All right, you may begin your closing argument.
And Your Honor, may I ask that I reserve up to a minute of my remaining time for rebuttal?
You may.
Keeping your word is important. It's important for people, and it's important for businesses. Today, the defendant didn't keep their word to you or my client. They failed to follow through with the claims they made to you at the beginning of this trial, and they failed to fulfill the responsibility they had to my client. May it please the court, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Today, we as the plaintiff had a burden of proof. However, you saw that every aspect of our burden was not contested. We had to prove that the policy between the Musée d'Orso and Seascape Insurance was a valid and enforceable contract. That was not disputed. We had to prove that Seascape refused to pay under this policy. That was not disputed. We had to prove that Seascape's refusal to pay caused the Musée d'Orso damage. That was not disputed. You saw that the Musée d'Orso lost over $100 million as a result of the robbery. Now, Seascape can only avoid paying my client if an employee of the Musée d'Orso was involved in the robbery. And they have failed to prove that by a preponderance of the evidence. Now, opposing counsel in their opening statement told you that timing is really important. But one person who really understood that time is really important was Mr. Eli Foy. Seascape criticizes Eli Foy for letting in the robbers that night, but what he really was doing, what they're really criticizing him for, is acting like a good cop. He was told that a fellow police officer was shot, and he knew he had to act quickly. He knew time was of the essence, and it was an emergent and unprecedented situation in which he had to break protocol. Seascape also criticizes Detective Dockray for what they claim to be an incomplete investigation. But what is it that they're saying that she missed? She investigated both night guards, conducted multiple searches of Eli Foy's home. She even took up the personal laptops of both Eli Foy and Mozzie. She found nothing. She also relied on a forensic report in which the FBI themselves consulted on. They didn't find anything conclusive. Now, Detective Dockray is an employee of the Russellville Police Department. She has no stake in the outcome of today's trial. However, every single witness that the defendant presented to you today does. Mozzie, a night guard who unfortunately isn't making anything out of his salary at this moment, is getting paid $300 an hour just to testify here today. Remington Stoll is getting paid $1 million for her opinion and testimony. And you all heard that she just really loves money. And finally, Remington's Renee Rousseau. You heard that if Seascape successfully denies the claims today, she'll be walking out of this trial a very rich woman. $7.5 million solely in bonuses. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, both sides presented an investigation to you. The difference between the two investigations is one, the police's investigation didn't come in with a predetermined conclusion. Two, the police's investigation was not privately funded. And three, the police's investigation investigated more leads like Melissa Roberts and the Rexford Solutions employees. The defendant has not met their burden today, and they have not proven that Mr. Eli Foy knowingly participated in the robbery of the Musée d'Orso on May 1st. After this trial, all the evidence that you heard can only lead to one verdict. Find Seascape liable. Thank you.
Closing, Your Honor.
Yes.
May I retrieve my exhibit really quickly?
Yes, you may.
What was that? And may I also use Exhibit 2? May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may.
May it please the court, Your Honor, opposing counsel, members of the jury. What flies but has no wings? Timing is the answer in this riddle, and the answer in today's case as well. As you heard from my co-counsel at the beginning of today's trial, timing is everything. The timing in this crime was so perfect, in fact, that we proved today by a preponderance of the evidence, that is a greater weight of the credible evidence, that a then employee, Eli Foy, knowingly participated in the robbery of Musée d'Orsay. Let's look at the evidence. 3:30 a.m., May 1st, 2021, two men posing as police officers approach the exterior door at Musée d'Orsay. Eli Foy lets them in. Then, checking the door log, we can see that 3 minutes are spent in the interior hallway. 3 minutes is a long time. 3 minutes is enough time for Mr. Foy to have said, "Pardon me, officers, I need to call my boss to follow protocol." Or enough time to say, "Pardon me, I need to call the police station to make sure that you're real police officers." But Eli Foy didn't do that. Instead, those 3 minutes were spent waiting for Mozzie to open the interior door. If Mr. Foy didn't want to implicate himself in the crime, he would have waited those 3 minutes to try and get Mozzie to open that door. And when he finally realized that wasn't going to happen, he opened it himself. Then in the security room, 11 minutes spent on the following things. The guards are held at gunpoint, their badges are taken, their phones are taken and destroyed, the hard drive is found and destroyed, the computer is accessed and the cloud is wiped. Then Mr. Mozzie's tied up and put in office number 2. And then 8 minutes for Mr. Foy to cross this hallway to go into office number 1. 8 minutes to cross the hallway. It's not the Green Mile. In fact, it's our theory as the defense that Eli Foy didn't go into office number 1 and stay there until the morning. In fact, Eli Foy wasn't just needed to get into the museum, he was needed for labor in the crime. He was needed in the still life collection to remove those screws, to steal those 5 paintings. And then, finally, if we check the door log again at 4:52 a.m., right before the robbers leave, office number one's door is opened again. Eli Foy had to get in position so that he could be found by the morning guards. In the contract that Seascape and Musée d'Orsay signed, there was an exclusion. The exclusion is that if a then employee knowingly participates in the theft, Seascape doesn't cover that. Seascape kept their promise to the museum. The promises broken were on behalf of museum employees, Eli Foy and Rasson Crowe. Eli Foy broke his promise to Musée d'Orsay when he knowingly participated in the theft of the museum he says he loves. Rasson Crowe broke a promise when he filed a claim before knowing which 5 paintings were stolen, an invalid claim at that. In the course of today's trace, we have learned from Detective Dockray her first art investigation, and she admitted she made mistakes. Contrast that with the investigation of Seascape. 2 experts in their fields. It's not their first investigation. In fact, Ms. Rousseau said she's been to trials like this multiple times in the past and lost all but 1. I'd like to look at the evidence that we learned today that shows that Eli Foy was an insider in this job. Eli Foy was present when the password was changed and present when the cloud was wiped. Eli Foy had the opportunity to memorize that password. Eli Foy was last seen not tied up and was not seen tied up until the next morning. There is no one to account for those hours between 3 in the morning and 7 a.m. when he's found, because Mozzie was already in office number 2. There was no evidence that said Eli Foy stayed in office number 1 that night. In fact, we have proven today, by a preponderance of the evidence, that he was knowingly participating. Plaintiff had a burden to prove in today's case, and they did not meet their burden. In fact, they did not even touch on one of the elements of their burden. They were supposed to tell you today the value of the art, that it amounted to more than $10 million, and yet that was not once discussed in their opening or closing statement or throughout the trial today. As a defense, we have met our burden. of proving by a preponderance of the evidence that Eli Foy was knowingly involved, and Seascape is thus not liable for paying Musée d'Orsay. Thank you.
Your Honor, may I take a second to set up the display?
Oh, sorry. I would have left it up. Did you want exhibit number 1?
Yes, I do.
Okay, great.
And before I begin my rebuttal, Your Honor, I'd like to ask how much time I have left. 1 minute. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Ms. Gameros just came up here and told you a very elaborate story. She told you that Eli Foy knowingly participated in the robbery, but let's talk about what actually happened. When Eli Foy talked to the robbers outside the exterior door, he let them into the interior hallway to gain more information. At that point, he did not know that they were robbers. He did not know they were going to rob the museum, and he did not know that they were going to rob the museum of its 5 precious paintings. But what we do know in today's case is that Detective Dockray didn't find any physical forensic evidence. Detective Dockray didn't find anything in her home searches. Detective Dockray followed many leads that offer more possibilities, as said by Remington, Stoll, and for that reason, Seascape has not met their burden by a preponderance of the evidence today. At the end of this trial, you'll be asked to find a verdict, and you should find Seascape liable. Thank you.
All right. I invite everyone now to please give both teams a round of applause. All right, and I think now we need to collect the timekeeper sheets. And I'll ask whether there were any timing violations. Okay, thank you. And lastly, I'll ask each team whether you believe there is a material rules violation that occurred during the trial.
No, Your Honor, we do not allege any rule violations.
No rule violations from the defense, Your Honor.
Thank you. All right, members of the jury, you're retired to deliberate your verdict.
Y'all did really good.
I loved your personality. You came up there and I was like, oh my God.
I finally have Mozzie with like an actual personality.
Lost all but one.
Six trials in 2 days, that's a lot of work.
Yeah. But thank you so much for the opportunity. It was amazing.
I'm glad you guys did it. It's fun.
I have to go put my stuff.
I know. So I thought you were about to get mad at me. I thought I was about to get in trouble.
I can tell you guys love you, especially you get
Keishan, I'm proud of you, Joe. Very good.
It's like during a little. You were
Just hope and pray us. Keishan, I'm so sorry about my dress. Thank you. I don't know what happened. I went out of order. Oh, yeah. Okay, where's I felt so bad when I actually realized I did go out.
No, actually, our direct was absolutely perfect. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know what's about.
Okay, he's not now.
I'm so sorry, dude.
So fast on those objections.
Look, if anything, I should be sorry for not impeaching.
No, that was.
You did good. That was a really bad impeachment.
I forgot about that, to be honest.
Do I need to teach you guys how to put on a mic pack? I felt.
Yeah, Addie would look like
That was look like a robot with her antenna. That was so. Put your mic pack on the back of your jacket.
Because I can't put it on anywhere else in the dress.
It looks ridiculous from like the perspective of someone behind you.
Okay, whatever.
Okay, also, it wasn't on. Can I see it?
It wasn't on. It was not on. This isn't plugged in. It's supposed to be on. Okay. Yeah. That part is not on.
Good. I'm gonna wash it and see how every mistake I made.
She also regretted it. She regretted it. She also was like,
Okay.
Where's Melissa? Can you see Melissa back there? Is she there? Oh, okay. Melissa, are you going to come take pictures? Are you going to take pictures? Okay. Sit.
Please be seated. All right. Our jury has reached a verdict, and before we get into that, I would like for each of our jurors to briefly introduce yourselves.
I'm Tom Goranson. I'm a state mock trial junkie. This is my 17th trial this year. I have a law firm, a family law firm, started back in 1987. It's wonderful to watch you guys. It's amazing how good you are.
Dennis, and I also do family law. Been up again times, or a few times. But y'all were amazing. Great job, everybody.
My name is Jamie Olin. I'm a partner at a patent litigation firm in Dallas. And yeah, this round, y'all were just on fire. It was amazing.
My name is Corey Lipschutz. I practice primarily patent litigation with some commercial litigation as well. And I've seen both of you earlier today. I think I said it before and I'll say it again. There's a reason you all went into the finals.
I'm Andy Jones. I'm a plaintiff's personal injury lawyer at Sawyer Law here in Dallas. You guys rock.
Hi, I'm Allison Rapon. I am a member of the mock trial committee. I also am a mock trial coach myself at SMU Law School. And in my day job, I am an assistant U.S. attorney, which I enjoy so much. And I just love, I said it before, I'll say it again, even though it's juicy. I love getting to see you all develop and grow through this program. Both teams were absolutely incredible. And I'm just so proud to be able to be a part of putting this on so y'all can do an amazing job like you did today.
I'm Don Wiley. I'm an estate and philanthropy lawyer. I don't do trial work, so this is all strange to me pretty much. But I did help write the problem, and y'all did a tremendous job, and it's fun to see characters that you write come to life.
Remington Stoll.
My name's Robert Toby. I'm a commercial trial lawyer with Johnston Toby Group here in Dallas. Judged a number of rounds, not as many as Tom, but really great job here in the finals, and congratulations to everybody. You all have very bright futures.
My name is Nadia Hegi-Gatian. I'm president of the Dallas LGBT Bar Association. And for my day job, I'm a partner at Holland & I, and I practice patent litigation mostly. Everybody today did outstanding. You should all be very proud.
And my name is Lana Myers, and I'm a justice on the 5th District Court of Appeals in Dallas, a former criminal district trial judge for 15 years before I got on the Court of Appeals in 2009, and a former chair of the mock trial committee. I've worked with Mr. Gwynn many times, and it's always a pleasure for me and an honor to preside over these rounds, and especially the final round of 2 outstanding teams.
Let's do the third place.
All right. We'll start with the 3rd place winner, Covenant Classical School. Yes, this is the hard part. The second place winner is Frisco CTE. And our first place winner is Booker T. Washington.
What? 1 second. Which one? Turn this up. Is it? So nice. Oh my God. Okay.
Let the parents get one.
Okay. Oh, yeah, parents.
Yeah, happy.
You guys are getting that. Congrats, guys.
So you're probably wondering what it was. The ballot was 5-4. It doesn't get any closer than that. That's why we have 9 people, because 5-4 is easier to accept than 2-1. And it was really, really, really close. Taylor and I were going back and forth the whole time, making notes and talking about what's this, how many points is this, how's that, and the stuff that we identified and the stuff that judges identified. I think you'll see the score sheets. It was really, 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 really close. Congratulations to both teams. You guys, this is your first time in the Final Four. It's like ever. You guys have had a mock trial team for what, 4 years?
No, us?
Yeah.
This is my 17th year.
17th year with Frisco CTE?
Since 2008 with CTE.
With CTE, okay.
Yes,
Okay.
started out at Centennial High.
At Centennial, okay. So CTE has been around for a few years, but only started the last couple of years becoming, last year you made it to state for the first time, right?
No, 16 is first time.
16 was first time, okay. But it's a program that's growing. Seniors on this team, how many?
All of us.
Oh, okay, okay. The 4. Well, and that happens. So, but you're leaving a good legacy. You planted a good seed. Booker T has repeated. That has been a while. The last repeat team we had was Carrollton Creekview. And that was a very, very good team. And it went for 5 out of 6 years that they went to nationals. So, and they did very well. Last year, you guys went 3-1 and were 11th in the country. And we're looking for that kind of. Yeah, that's always the goal. Other than that, Taylor, anything?
No, it's great, guys.
Here endeth the 43rd annual High School Mock Trial Championships in the state of Texas. Congratulations, everybody. Come here, guys. Oh, you only have 7? guys know the drill. Okay? Start now getting ahead in your class. How many people? So get ahead on your class. And so for the rest of you, get focused, and then we'll start working on what needs to change, why should work. I'm guessing
a little bit more, yeah, kind of right there.
because they probably had a lot of contracts.
There we go. Yeah, okay.
Hotels and stuff, and they had to give that back because they were probably told, it's either now or you're coming. And they didn't know.
Perfect. Thank you so much,
So
everybody.
get ahead on stuff. We're gonna work on things. Make sure, and if you go, we're gonna have to go listening, what outside you did, listening, you said watch the show, and, but listen to like what the objection is, and don't assume what they're gonna say.
Right. I mean, if it is, it's a
You guys,
coincidence.
yeah.
Oh, no.